Hello and welcome to episode 206 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 13th of September. I didn't look at the date. 2017, my name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Philippa War.
Hello.
Tom Senior.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
But can you tell which is which? How is everybody on this rainy evening? More specifically, Tom Francis, how are you?
I'm quite tired.
Some big news.
Yeah. Heat Signature is coming out on the 21st, which is, at time of recording, a week and a day away. And when you listen to it, less than that.
Yeah,
One day, less than a week.
It'll be 6 days away by the time you listen to this. If you listen to it on Friday, the 15th of September, if you do not do that, it'll be a different number of days away, or it will have already happened.
It's a terrifying thing, actually, deciding on a release date, because I don't announce them until the game's basically done, because you just don't know until it's done. And that means that the actual moment that you do it is kind of, you have to realize that it's a decision you make, not a piece of information you learn. Like, you don't look at the game and discover, oh, it'll be out on this date. You have to just decide it's going to be out on this date. And then everything else has to shrink or expand to fit that.
Would you prefer it if game ideas had a due date?
No.
Like human children.
To some extent, that's called having a publisher.
Yeah, that's the, and that would have been a nightmare with Heat Signature. I did the stuff for the special edition a little while back, which includes videos of me playing early prototypes from throughout its development, going all the way back to like 2013. And it's just astonishing how many of them there are. I had to sort through like 2,500 versions of the game to pick out 8 that were interesting, and then play those. And just seeing how it just went back and forth and kept changing what it is and how it works. And the basic question of like, what is the context for your missions? Your missions were followed a pretty straightforward development from, a simple version of what they are now to what they are now. But why you're doing them and what happens after you complete one and how that ties into anything else just changed like 25 times completely, to the point where in some cases I actually went backwards. Like, I did a missions listing board and then I changed my mind and decided all the missions should be out in the world and you should just bump into them as you fly around. And then I changed my mind back and did a missions listing board again.
Given that, I imagine obviously a lot of people listening to this podcast will know that you've been working on Heat Signature for basically the entire life of this podcast.
Yeah, it was pretty similar timing.
So, but, people might not have, played it in its most recent, beta iteration or anything like that. So you could tell people what Heat Signature actually is now. People have watched trailers and things.
It is, a game about breaking into spaceships, making terrible mistakes and thinking of clever ways out of them. You are flying around in a tiny little pod that has no weapons, and all it can do is dock with the airlocks of other bigger randomly generated ships, unnoticed. And once you do that, you get to walk around inside their corridors and sneak past their crew and beat up their crew and steal their loot. And you're usually there to do some kind of mission, like assassinate somebody or hijack the whole ship or rescue someone or kill someone. And once you've done that, you can either just get out or you can hijack the whole ship, even if you weren't being hired to do that, and go back to a space station and you get paid. And that gets you closer to liberating more space stations. You only start with one and then you unlock new technologies and shops by liberating more space stations. And B, getting paid gets you closer to being able to afford the intel you need to complete your personal mission. And every character is randomly generated and they have a randomly generated personal mission, which will be something like rescue my brother from the glitches or kill the sovereign officer who murdered my son. And that's a kind of climactic heist that is going to be way harder than the other missions, and will take a long time to work towards. That's been an interesting thing because I've tried to be very accepting of different, basically just provide a very wide range of difficulty. So the missions listing board always goes from easy to all the way up to mistake. So there are 7 difficulty levels, and the easy is really, really easy, and mistake is really, really hard. So in theory, there should be no one who can't do an easy mission, and very few people who can do a mistake mission without having to first go out and get specialized equipment and stuff. But for the personal mission, it kind of needs to be a sort of max difficulty one, pretty much. And that prevents an interesting problem because the people who are playing the easier stuff have a bigger shock when they go for one of those. But doing that is just purely for your own satisfaction. It doesn't actually change anything about the galaxy. You don't have to do those at all. They're just there as a kind of, this is what this character wants to do. If you ever get to the point where you feel powerful enough to do this, you can do it. And all it really does is give you something to aim towards. And once you've done it, your character is kind of done. You can continue playing with them if you like, but they have no other personal goal, and they have the option to retire. And in fact, now if you do retire, when you've completed your personal goal, you get to sort of hang up one of your weapons and pass it on, and then other characters can find it, including your future characters, but also your Steam friends can find your items if you've passed them on and you get to name them and stuff.
When I was playing the beta, I found a lot of your stuff. Is that because we're Steam friends, or is it because you are the man from the game?
No, that's because we're Steam friends. And actually, John Roberts had an interesting idea the other day, which was we should in some way mark those out as special, like the ones that belong to us, and then track them and see how far they get. You know, because if you find my weapon and you then retire and you choose to pass that one on, then someone else will find it. And
That's a good idea. Like a virus, but
yeah. An heirloom virus.
That's really exciting. I don't feel like we've rested enough on the point that you've finished your game.
I know, it's crazy. It also, like, it's a really big thing to have a date because, you know, it's like locked in on Steam and everything, because I've suddenly moved from the group of, there's almost like a little support group of, we developers who've been working on a thing for more than 3 years. Like, you know, there are a number of these, games that just seem to go on forever. And there's a very strong line, and we all know this, between the ones that never come out and the ones that do eventually come out and, you know, hang together okay and aren't a total disaster. You know, the line between, I mean, I want to say, what's like, because Duke Nukem Forever eventually came out, so what's the biggest, like, vaporware game that never did come out? Half-Life 3, I guess. But
yeah, it's Half-Life 3, Tom. Yeah, no, in terms of didn't come out at all, rather than came out and was fine, or came out and was bad.
Yeah.
Half-Life.
But I mean, Half-Life 3 still could come out, whereas I feel like there are other high-profile ones that are just, it's over now, like team have disbanded and maybe not, maybe everything comes back eventually.
Yeah, I think the recent era of, I think people might have said that for like Age of Empires a while ago, but that's been announced now, that's happening.
Yeah,
like,
things get rebooted now, don't they? And even stuff like, remember XCOM The Bureau? That was eventually made into something, wasn't it? But that was basically vaporware before they picked up those assets and decided to wrangle them into something.
Yeah. Anyway, it's nice to not be that.
Titan, maybe Blizzard's Titan.
Oh yeah,
that was something they kind of gave up on. And obviously, it came out in a form, but it definitely was like we've done something different with this idea that we've been struggling with for ages and ages and ages.
Yeah.
Do you get resented? Like how when people finish their thesis and everyone else is still, you know, plugging away at it, they're like, I'm really pleased for you, but through gritted teeth and like never speaking to you again?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so I don't know. But I did have a friend, I think I won't name him just in case he didn't want this to be the kind of thing that I tell other people, but who's a more established game developer who about 2 years ago when I was at GDC, I was really going through a tough time with Heat Signature. Really just been working on it so hard, and I still was not close to being done, and I was starting to get daunted by it. And so I was talking to friends out there and saying, you know, I think I'm going to take a break for a little while, which I did. And he said, you know, I like you a lot more now that you're struggling with this. It's really annoying when you just, like, the first one just went so well.
I suppose, yeah, this is the first game you've done as your full-time job.
Yep.
Which is kind of nuts, because, hang on, did this take the same amount of time as Gunpoint?
Longer. Longer in calendar years, and also it was full-time, not part-time, so hugely longer in actual man hours.
Huh. I have no further observation there. It's just
if you're making a game, don't mess with controls structure, like metagame sort of strategy layer, and cameras. Those are the three things that if you're going to do anything experimental with those, that needs to be the only new thing about your game, and everything else needs to be completely derivative and straightforward. And you need to have sort of like a prototype that shows the way you're going to do it fundamentally works for everybody you test it with. Because all three of those things, if you change from convention even slightly, people fucking hate it. And it leads to all kinds of technical and interaction problems and usability problems that you can't foresee, and they fight each other. And so on all three of those things, I either had to just walk back what I was going to do, or spend years getting it right. So the camera, it was years getting it right. Structure, it was years getting it right. And controls, I just backed off and went to convention. Because it was going to be click to move, like inside the ship, you just click where you wanted to go, which I thought would be more accessible, and I was profoundly wrong.
What happens now? Like, are you looking forward to this? Is it terrifying?
Yeah,
Will you take a holiday?
Yeah, I've been thinking about maybe just going to like a nice hot place on my own for like a week, just for a short break where I don't do anything.
Except refresh Steam.
You will come
figures.
back with a game idea. Garen fucking did.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, the thing, all the ticking clocks going on inside me, the exhaustion one is not nearly so strong as the desperation to start something new. Like, I'm always having ideas, and I'm very strict about it. I don't start new things, except for Morphblade, that was the break I was talking about when I was burnt out on Heat Signature.
What floating point?
Floating point was before Heat Signature. I think Heat Signature existed, but that was back when I was working on that and the heist game, and then the heist game became Floating Point, and that was kind of, I was intentionally in a mode where I had lots of different things going on and was still deciding what to focus on. But yeah, in general, I don't start new things because it can be poison to the thing that you need to finish.
That's how you get vaporware.
Yep. And so now I really have loads of things I really want to start.
That's rad though. Congratulations, Tom.
Yeah.
I feel like we should clap or something. It's bad,
Well, it hasn't
bad
happened yet, so-
etiquette.
Well, I'm holding my wine, so I'm just gonna...
I was about to say,
Okay.
clapping's bad podcast etiquette. Hitting a microphone with a wine glass.
I could shout again.
Not again.
Right.
Pip was shouting earlier. But yeah, so that's the only news that matters this week as far as I'm concerned, gaming-wise.
Well, I did find the Eve story very interesting.
Oh yeah, speaking of space station heists. There you go.
Yeah.
There's a segue and a half. Unless you wanted to mention Heatsig's launch week things, incidentally. I don't know if that's worth mentioning while they're timely.
Yeah, I guess so. Basically, if you play in launch week, there is a ship going through the galaxy that has a unique weapon on it called the Everything Gun. And if you steal that, you can use it, and also you'll continue to find it as a random drop in future. And that is a gun that teleports nearby items into its barrel and fires them out. So you just click once and it just immediately shoots all the nearby things like wrenches and swords and other guns out in a kind of shotgun spread. And so it's a bit like the gravity gun, but with less work. You don't need to pick things up first. It just automatically fires them out. And what it fires is up to you. You can leave things lying around. And then also we are going to make the trading cards about players. So we're looking for people to send us, like GIFs and short clips of cool things they did in the game. And the most interesting ones will, name a trading card after that person and make them the kind of the legends of Heat Signature's canon.
The Lords of Heat.
Yes. That's my mum would say.
Rad. Sorry, yeah. So the Eve thing, which I don't know. Someone's going to have to explain.
Okay. A giant, incredibly valuable space station was stolen by a defector, who I don't know the name of the alliance that lost it, but the alliance that the guy defected to was the Goon Swarm, which is the infamous
Traditional villains of
yep.
online.
Who I've missed a chapter in this because apparently they had a fall from grace. They were sort of pushed out by a consortium of banks and casinos.
I love Eve.
Yeah, it's amazing. I didn't get all the way through reading that because then I remembered I had to make game to make. But yeah, apparently there was like sort of, I think like Chinese casinos or something came in and muscled into Eve and just got really serious about it in a way that sort of picked apart the Goon Swarm. And then that's over now and the Goon Swarm are back in strength. And their latest coup was to pay someone who works for one of their rivals a vast amount of money to flip to their side, and that guy was already dissatisfied with with his alliance, and he had, I guess, the keys to this station, and it's sort of like, it's a station that has all people's stuff in it, like, loads of ships and valuable things. I don't remember the value in ISK, but if I said it, it probably wouldn't mean anything to anyone who doesn't already know the story. So I assume it's a lot of money.
Isn't it millions and millions?
Yeah, billions, I think, in ISK. But the most important part of the story is that they then used the projected warp inhibitor bubbles in space, which are giant sort of fields in which you can't use warp engines. And because they're strategically important, you can see them from a very long way away. And they use those to spell out LOL above the station.
That's the screenshot that I've seen.
Didn't they, can it very slowly fly away? Like what? What does stealing a space station look like?
No, I think it's just ownership. I think it stays where it is. And it just flipped. And I think this is the first time it's happened. I think that this is not like just a space station. I think it's, I don't know Eve well enough to say confidently, but it sounded to me like it's the station equivalent of those Titans, when there was a dangerous ship type that took a village to build, basically.
As Hillary Clinton famously wrote, it takes a village to build a Titan.
A Titan class warship.
But yes, it feels like Eve is constantly the story of there's a new massive thing in the game, and 6 months later, now somebody stole it.
Somebody stole the thing and wrote LOL in Sky.
Be an ever bigger thing. Are we planets next? Or, solar systems? Or actually, that's already happened.
It's nice that it's still generating these stories, though. Part of me expects it to sort of just degenerate into something that doesn't work anymore, where no one trusts anybody, and so there are no alliances, and this stuff can't happen. Because this stuff requires a certain amount of civilization. It needs enough people to believe there's trust and loyalty, but also it needs people who have no loyalty to make these spectacular, terrible moments.
I think it's interesting, its security system creates this tension between sort of reliability and risk and reward out in the kind of wilderness of nullsec that kind of naturally kind of creates that drama. I think it's really elegant, kind of the way it's divided up. It's something that we looked at or are looking at a lot for Hackmud, because Hackmud's a very different game.
But it's got a similar sort of security zone system.
It has a security zone system for how secure a script is. But that's something that will hopefully, I'm not going to speak too much, but be reflected in the structure of the game in the future as well, right. Because it helps people understand what danger looks like. And in a text-based game, that's quite hard to express. I mean, and to be honest, even in a space-based game, it's hard to express, because telling someone this nebula is dangerous, this nebula isn't, is not something that's not as immediately visible as it would be in a different game. Obviously, it's harder in text. But yeah, I think Eve is kind of hit on. It's also managed, I think, probably to distill down to the group of players at its core, whose interest in the game is keeping that kind of drama going over time. I think people would like to win, but a lot of those players are now directly in contact with CCP as well. So CCP are essentially in a position where they can probably dungeon master an MMO for about 20 people, who through the network of alliances and the players whose lives they kind of interact with end up having this huge story about hundreds of thousands of players or tens of thousands of players. But it's kind of an interesting sort of
But there's also
model.
an in-game cult of celebrity, and there are people who are more than happy to be the pantomime villains of the scene, and so they will always be keen to stir up trouble or to at least have the next caper, because that's what they do. That's their role in the game, right? And what they have sort of carved out for themselves as a niche.
I enjoy the fact it's kind of libertarian frontier wilderness, where there is also a god in the form of a team of developers that can actually step in at any given point and kind of stop things from happening. They're the funniest moments in EVE Online to me, where the developers actually have to say, stop this now. It's gone too far.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's there is a god, but there's also a GM, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting way of thinking about live games and that kind of thing is when it's a huge benefit of it being ultimately a single shard game. I appreciate there's a Chinese server, but that's for sort of legal reasons and for sort of international policy reasons, rather than, I think if they could, they would just have one version of Eve.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's definitely a real benefit of that is, they can ultimately kind of just tell one story, even though there are tens of thousands of people kind of encountering it from that many different angles. But yeah, I'm going to FanFest for the first time this year, which is in Vegas this year, which is kind of nuts.
From what I remember, it's a big event of really just sort of interesting conversations about things that I knew nothing about and frantic cheering that absolutely mystified me. And I play MOBAs.
That's the two of my favourite things.
And spaceships. You will be in your element.
Oh, man.
You might cry.
The thing is, and I say this now, so this is early October, so I've got a few weeks of pods away before I come back and tell everyone. And I will say this. I'm going to say,
start playing Eve
yep,
again.
that's going to happen.
And
I can see it coming like a train.
All journalists.
It's not going to last. It's like going to BlizzCon. Everyone goes to BlizzCon, comes back, plays WoW again for a week, and then goes, what am I doing? It's the magic of, actually, in a nice way, it's the magic of being in a room where that many people love a thing, it kind of rubs off on you. It's not just I've been marketed to. It's not as cynical as that. It is genuinely, you go to these places and you see the fans and like, oh my God, this is their favorite thing in the world. I want to be them. And then you get home and it's like,
I had a really nice conversation with a guy who runs one of the, there's like Eve University or whatever that thing is that like teaches
I was a member of
new
Eve
players
University for a long time.
It's just really quite sweet, and it's kind of the opposite of what happens in nullsec. And I had such a nice conversation with him that I came home and I wanted to start playing Eve just to not let him down. And then I was like, what am I doing? I'm so bad at all things that this requires.
You've got to justify that scholarship.
Oh God, my scholarship bucks.
I got into Eve University on a Dota scholarship. But no one really respects my right to be there.
No. I'm just a ringer.
I actually do want to go back to World of Warcraft, which you mentioned just now. Like, I think because I haven't had a lot of time to like not continuous time to sink into a game. Now I keep fantasizing about playing like really rich, deep, life-destroying games, like
Join us
WoW.
in Destiny
2. Destiny.
Yeah,
I've started actually. But I remember, I was thinking about starting a new character in WoW and what that would be like, and, cause I don't want to like join a guild or anything and, get deeply into it. I just want to like experience that world again and just go around and see how it's changed and, do a couple of satisfying quests and stuff. And my last experience of doing that was, on a sick day from PC Gamer. I genuinely was ill and I'd stayed home because I was ill. But there's sort of like this fiction that you can't play games when you're ill, like you're not supposed to. But you clearly can. Like, it's a great thing to play when you're ill. It's totally the antidote to it. But I also felt bad about, I didn't want people at work to like see me log in. And on Blizzard, you can't hide you can't like appear offline or go invisible or anything. At least back then you couldn't. I don't know if you can now.
You need to block all of your friends.
So I created a new like free trial account, played on a different server as a mage, and just there's a little mage somewhere now that I played for one day, and it was lovely. I'd never played an alliance character before, and all their areas are so nice. They're just so pretty and sunny and idyllic. And also mages are fucking badasses. Just can cope with anything.
Yeah, I get the WoW thing every now and then, but it's just been far too long, and there's far too much, and it's too old, and I'm too old.
And I'm far too here.
Yeah, indeed. Destiny, that's a different matter.
God, actually, I had a taxi driver the other day, who got talking about games and, he just explained to me how World of Warcraft destroyed his life, destroyed his marriage.
It's one of the only, certainly is one of the only games I've seen actively, like, harm somebody's happiness. And I don't think that's on the game. I think it's addictive, any sufficiently addictive game could do that, I think. But at the same time, I've seen in real time happening to a friend.
Yeah, that's a case where it does feel like it's not cynically designed to make that happen, because apart from anything else, it doesn't really benefit Blizzard for that to happen.
No.
They want you to casually play it for a very long period of time because they make money every month, not from the sheer hours you pump into it. And so for them, it's better if you don't burn out quickly. But yeah, there is inevitably, I think, like, trying to make it engaging and fun overlaps with making it addictive, and to a certain personality type that can be fatal.
Yeah.
Have you played Guild Wars 2, Tom?
Yeah.
That's worth a revisit. A few expansions have been added now, new areas and stuff.
I can't really remember why I stopped. I was really enjoying it at the time.
Yeah. Well, like, Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2 specifically and sort of Destiny are kind of alike in my brain now. I think it's the same thing I like about both. They're very different games, but it's the same things that I like about both. Like, I loved Guild Wars 2. I was really in love with it, I think, as a piece of design. And coming back to Destiny 2 in the last couple of weeks, and I promise this time I definitely am not going to wang on about it for 20 minutes. It did have that same thing of like, I think I tweeted this, but the thing that made me realize is that like, I get the sort of the things that are normally like, or in this podcast that we normally get excited about design wise tend to be things like, you know, emergent game systems or immersive sims, if that's the word you want to use, or like roguelikes and things like that. But I definitely have a part of my brain that it just loves really nicely designed social games. Like, whenever I kind of realize that I've just entered a game, clicked a few things, and I've entered a social space and I'm having an adventure with other players and they're there and they're enhancing my experience, but I haven't really asked for it and it's just happening around me and it's kind of cool. That kind of like is its own school of game design, on far more on the kind of games as service side of things that I really love. And when that magic trick is pulled off successfully, as it is in both Guild Wars 2 and Destiny 2, I think to a very high standard, it is proper kind of like, this is rad. Like, I'm having an adventure and it means something that this is multiplayer. Like, it's not just co-op optional, I'll never touch this, but like, this is better because I was doing a thing and then a man came over a cliff on a space bike and jumped off and then drew a flaming gun and this happened. And you know what I mean? That kind of, and then,
you have to tell the stories in that voice.
Yeah. You have to, there's got a sort of mad kind of register. But yeah, that kind of, any social multiplayer game that's capable of kind of having those sort of moments of spectacle, which I guess are kind of the multiplayer equivalent of the Far Cry, and then a bear came along, and then this happened. Like, it's full of them. That's the thing. I almost posted this in chat, Tom, but if I was going to ever sell Destiny 2 to you, it would be literally, it's got more than ever instances where two completely asymmetric factions of AI fight each other and the players are also there, which is, yeah, I'm not going to wang on about it for 20 minutes. I'm going to shush now. Shushing. Pip?
Yes?
What have you been playing?
Oh, well, so I've been playing two things. One is big and one is small. The small thing is Fugl.
Oh, great.
Which will be in early access by the time this podcast
How do you spell that for the benefit
out.
of me?
Fugl.
Fugl.
Yes.
What are we going against GL? It's a perfectly viable alternative to DirectX.
Well, somebody in the comments last time I wrote about it pointed out that it's one letter away from Fugly, and the developer acknowledged that this to be the case, but that they ultimately decided to stick with the name. That is a voxel-based generated landscape that you swoop through as a bird. And in flying close to other birds or other creatures, you take on their characteristics. You can still fly. So it's kind of like you become a flying monkey, or you become a flying bird version of a deer or a goat or a bear or a crab, that kind of stuff, which is kind of cool. I think my favourite is the duck.
Like a duck that can fly.
Flying duck.
Yes.
What are those? Do those creatures look weird with wings? Like a monkey with wings?
Mostly, I would say they don't particularly. It's more that I think often you maybe can't tell that they aren't a bird exactly, if you see what I mean. So when I landed, I crashed into the side of a cliff, and it was sufficiently near a deer that was on said sort of precipice that I turned into a flying version of that. And to be honest, you probably wouldn't have known that if I hadn't had the camera angled so that I could see the face, because it was like it had a nose that was deer-like and things like that.
Was it bright red?
No. So there's things like that, or if you go if you go near to like a mountain goat, your like avatar takes on like these horns, things like that.
So it's like
really.
aspects of the animal rather
So
than...
it's aspects of the animal and the colouring, particularly. And if it's in the case of a bird, you become sort of smaller or longer, or your flap are, you know,
Flaps.
faster or...
Your flaps are faster.
Get a greater flap span.
Oh, as in, I wasn't sure if you're referring to wings or the action of flapping.
Of the wings.
I see the action of your flaps.
Either quicker or slower base, because when you're a flamingo, you are a flamingo rather than just, you know, a flamingo-esque hummingbird or something, you know?
This makes complete sense, but is also nonsense.
Right, good, sure.
It's got quite the art style is big chunky voxels, right? And so it's quite non-specific perhaps on the fine details.
So yeah, although they managed to be really expressive, I can't remember the artist's name, but I linked in one of the articles to his
Jason Fugl.
to his cartridge, which is where he has like you know, kind of a portfolio, and there's a load of different animals, and they, you know, like you get a lot of expressiveness of that animal in those GIFs and in those screenshots and things, which is really cool. I think it can be hard to tell from far away. Like I couldn't always tell, especially with the smaller animals on land, whether I was heading towards like a coconut crab or a monkey or, you know, anything of that ilk. And occasionally when I'd landed or when I'd passed close to something that I hadn't quite registered, sometimes the characteristics didn't tell me exactly what I'd come too close to, if you see what I mean. So there was one point where I was like, was that a crab or a beetle, or, you know, because I had two sort of protuberances from my avatar's head that could have been like stag beetle horns, or they could have been like crab claws, or, you know, things like that. So that was kind of interesting in that, but it doesn't really impact the game. It's not like you're trying to collect all of these things. It's more that you'll see one in the environment and decide, oh, I'll be one of those for a while. That's quite cool. The thing is, it's in early access, and I think it will be. They suggested like a 6 months-ish frame for that, but obviously, you know, could be longer, could be shorter, don't know. But so there are a few things that I would say are important to note, which is stuff like, because the main point of the game is that it's supposed to be really chill and relaxing, and like, you know, the flight element and the exploration stuff is the important thing. And so if you go into it at the moment, certainly I experienced a couple of crashes, and also things like if you fly into obstacles when you're trying to get too close to, you know, like a monkey in a tree or something, like crash into the tree or whatever, it can be really difficult to take off again because of the way the controls work. So, or I tried to see whether I could take on the characteristics of some of the fish, or like dolphins popping out of the water and things, but all that happened was I crashed into the water, and then I really struggled to be able to get back up into the air. Like you'd take off, you'd do a few flaps, but the swoop, I think, was the thing that kept catching me on the surface of the water again, like as you tried to get momentum to get going. So it was things like that, and like, you know, just running into a few other glitches and things. I mean, obviously it's a work in progress, so you'd theoretically know that with early access, but I think given that relaxation is such a big part of the game, it's maybe a thing that people might want to bear in mind before they pick it up if they were interested. The voxel thing's interesting though, because I remember the developer, or one of the people on the development team, the lead developer, I guess, has been quite active in the comments on RPS. So someone was saying that they didn't like the voxel aesthetic.
Did you say you're shit out of luck?
Bad news.
Well, he was pointing out that it's that voxels were really useful because once you have a sense of one of those pieces, then the rest of it gives the sense of scale really easily, and the sense of speed and of swooping and things like that. And given that that was that sense of motion and flow, and this bird moving quickly through the air was a thing that was essential to the experience, you that's why they went with that, as well as obviously some other elements. And I really like the style of it and how it comes across, but I thought that was an interesting, technical point that,
for sure.
Scale is a lot easier, and, you get the sense of distance and speed and rate of movement.
If it's really good, then for a strapline, you could do resistance is Fugl.
Nice. I may steal that. On Steam.
Or if they add like a kind of wind pressure based physics system to the air in the... Oh, shut up.
Wait, where are you going with
Where
air
are you
resistance?
going with that?
For wings? Like air resistance? You fly? I don't know. Birds must contend with air resistance, surely.
That's true.
That's how flight works.
But also they can manipulate it and rely on it.
Yeah, but maybe that renders it. I don't know. It was a bit. I'm
I thought it
sorry.
was going towards a Fugl pun.
Yeah, sorry,
that.
that was just confusing.
Let's workshop this, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Bant rejected.
We'll take this offline.
Don't say that.
Shush no. So that's it goes into early access from the 14th of September. So by the time this goes up, it'll be
That's tomorrow
around.
or yesterday.
There was something else that I was going to say about it, and I have totally forgotten. Oh, on Steam, I get the impression that they didn't really think that people would know what Fugl was. So on Steam, it's Fugl-meditative bird game.
Gotta get that SEO. Meditative bird game, Swindon.
Yeah.
Meditative bird game, Cheltenham.
And the other thing is I'm back on League of Legends.
That's a big game.
The bigger game, yes.
Why? How? What's that like?
So it's because I've been trying to catch up with things in advance of Worlds, because I haven't had as much time to keep up with various bits and pieces, and it hasn't been the thing that I've been streaming on my second monitor. So I started watching it, and then I was like, I could play this too. And it's that sort of thing where I watch an awful lot, and so I'm familiar with theories, I'm familiar with how you're supposed to do things, I'm familiar with how the top tier of players do things. I don't do those things. And so I play all random, all mid most of the time when I do play, and I watch the rest of the time. And so actual 5v5 is something that I tend not to play. Like, I haven't played it in ages, and it's actually quite daunting. And so I've mostly been tooling around in 5v5 but co-op versus AI. So it's me and 4 other people, probably 4 other people, but versus 5 intermediate robots. And that's been kind of interesting because I've just been picking whoever I fancy playing because it's a less serious mode as well. But I'm wondering at what point I'll feel able to graduate to real people games. I'm slipping down because my mic is falling. So I'm basically
watching
horizontal.
you slowly get lower and lower to match the microphone instead of moving the microphone up.
I know. I thought I'd go with it. I thought I'd try and meet it on its own
Collapse into
terms.
a pip singularity as you give it opinions about
I'll
the
be
role.
on the floor. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's been so long since I had to be at the bottom of a MOBA pile that I've sort of gone, what do I do? So yeah, I've just been playing stuff that I fancied and doing all of that nonsense. But yeah, I'm still not sure at what point I'll decide to go over to real 5v5 human games.
Maybe never do. Maybe this can be the one that stays fun.
Maybe. Maybe. The thing is, I just feel like I'd quite like to have that sense of what it's like because I do have a sense of what it's like on the more normal levels away from pro play, but I think it's more just that, I don't know, I just haven't felt the need to play it in a long time, and I do now, but because I know so few people, all of my friends were Dota friends, right? So it's always a case of okay, I'm going to spin the wheel on the lottery of strangers.
Oh no.
So, yeah. And people will flame you in, like, 5v5 versus bots. They will rage quit bot matches. And you're kind of like, wow, okay. And someone actually said in chat that they were only playing the bot match so that they could get out of Leave Buster queue. And then left. Before, I was like, oh, come on.
Well, you brought this upon yourself.
So I was like, but yeah, so I've been having an alright time doing that. And yeah.
Leave Buster queue, is that like a hell you get put in if you leave too many games?
Yeah.
Right. So all the people who leave games have to play together?
With Pip.
I can't remember. I would need to look into that because I've never been put in that queue, Tom. I wouldn't know.
That's how it works in Dota. You have to play with the other people in your shitty queue.
The shitty pool of shitty people.
Because, like, my account is actually relatively low level because that's what happens when you understand MOBAs and you do your research, but without, like, because playing the game doesn't make you better at pro play, if you see what I mean. So, so my main account is actually still not, super high level or anything. And so I'm still sort of being matched slightly wonkily. And so I don't actually know who I'm being matched with because I certainly know that when I started playing League, because of my experience playing Dota, they have this thing where I think behind the scenes, like there are some things in place to try and work out if you're smurfing. And so it thought I was smurfing and kept putting me with other people who then knew what to do in this specific game, even though I only knew the rudiments of MOBAs because, whatever. And so they would know their Baron timings and dragon timings and jungle pathing. And I would be level 2 and people would be flaming me for not knowing the intricacies of the game even though they were all smurfing. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Smurfing is using a new account to appear lower level than you are?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a fair thing to do, or not a fair thing to do, but in some games, they won't let you play particular modes with your friends if there's too big of a level discrepancy. But if you're trying to shepherd a newcomer through, their first few games, then you might want to set up a new account and just sort of try and do them a solid, which is a decent thing to do, I would say.
Or if you've taken a sick day from work and you don't want your friends to know.
Yeah, hang on. Were you flaming all of these people for not being super high level? It's
flaming the NPCs.
I'm going to take this level 1 wizard to a raid. But yes, I've been playing around with that in advance of Worlds, so we shall see whether I will get any amazing insights against bots that I can then translate into my coverage of what Faker's up to.
Oh, bot would never do that.
He's left the game. I know about this.
Oh, God.
I think a few of us have played Tooth and Tail. That's the name of the game, right?
Yep.
I get mixed up which animal parts it is.
It is Tooth and Tail.
Does anyone remember what it used to be called? Because I remember it changed its name, and I cannot remember what it used to be.
Don't know.
It was
Woodland Animal Revolution.
It was a name that made me think of battleships, and I don't know why. But anyway, good job changing the name because they successfully erased the old one. And also, I remember the new one because they talked about it, and it has a kind of double meaning. I think it almost has 3 meanings because there's obviously it suggests animals, right?
That's true.
And it's about animals. It's an RTS with animal units. And Pip's face is completely bizarre at this point.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to get out of the way of my falling microphone, but I was also doing my thinking face, which involves having my tongue out and paying attention.
That sideways is a strange look.
I can appreciate that me paying attention is not something you're used to. What is that face that she is doing?
Yeah, I've never seen that before. But also apparently in military terms, the tooth to tail ratio of a unit is how many military personnel versus civilian personnel. So then military being the tooth and the civilians being the tail.
I did not know that.
And I don't know if this is intentional, but it just sounds like Tooth and Nail.
Yeah.
As in fighting desperately.
It also sounds a bit like
Tooth
Nature
and
Red
Claw.
and Tooth and Claw, which is very appropriate to the theme of the game as well. Which is, so it's an RTS, with I really like sort of pixel art style. So it's on an isometric plane, but it's all pixely things, he said, and sounded like he knows what the fuck he's talking about. It doesn't.
They call that isopixels. They don't.
Pixels.
Yeah. It's got like 18 isopixels. That's one of the best things about it. The theme is sort of like Bolshevik Redwall would be the way I would describe it, with a little bit of Les Mis, because there's a lot of revolutionaries waving flags. Which is,
Delacroix.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff I like, in that. And so the idea is there are different factions of sort of animal people. Well, the animals basically, mice and otters and weasels and pigs and rabbits and squirrels and things.
Farthingwood.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a Bolshevik revolution comes to Farthingwood. But it's a universe where animals have decided that the best thing to do is to eat each other. And so the kind of, the capitalist system that's either being fought over or subverted or overthrown or kind of whatever is the tendency for animals to literally drag each other to each other's feast tables and eat them. Like, that's what they do. It's pretty grim, actually. And some of the writing and kind of world building is actually kind of nice in how grim it is. Like, your farmer units that kind of generate resources back home are pigs that till fields, and pigs are basically the only vegetarians left. They still eat wheat, but no one else understands that. And the pigs don't have names anymore. They have numbers, and they know that they're dead. They're doomed, basically. Apart from the breeder pigs, which are the only ones that remember anything about the past, because they're the only ones that live long enough. But it's actually proper, like, dark.
That checks out, though.
Yeah, in its way.
Is it, are the factions, like, divided along species lines? Are they different species?
I don't think so. They're divided from political lines.
Right.
Obviously. So the ones you play in the...
There's red, blue, yellow, and green.
Yeah. You play as blue.
Is it far red or sort of moderate red?
Purple.
But yeah, so the main thing about it is it was intended to be played with a pad. Like, I've been playing it with a controller. And the way this manifests is, you are represented in the game, by, you're the biggest, you're the general, basically, and you wave a flag, and all you do is wave a flag, because you're literally the cursor. Like, one of the notes in the tutorial says, you are the cursor. Like, what a cursor would do in a normal RTS, you do, and you do it by running around the map in person. So, if you want to build something, you run to a square that you control, and you cycle to the building you want on Q and E normally, and then press spacebar to build it there if you've got enough resources. But if you want to, the most basic way is if you hold down the right mouse button, or if you click the right mouse button, you will set a kind of rally point where you're standing for everything in your army. And if you press the left mouse button, you'll set a rally point for only the units you currently have highlighted on just sort of your rotating unit wheel. It's super elegant in terms of how many controls it's managed to pare down the RTS to. Uses sort of context sensitive use of the same menu selection to govern lots of different things. I've only sort of gotten 4 or 5 missions into the campaign now. But I quite like it, actually. I think it's kind of, I'm very impressed by how successful it's pared down the RTS to a few interactions that take away a lot of the kind of input stress and APM stuff. But also I think the sort of, there's quite a lot of in a good way, quite a lot of depth where if you want to play it just in sort of zerging around, building lots of things, you can do that. But there are benefits to like micromanaging your units by setting different rally points for different unit types and sort of managing their various sort of rock, paper, scissors strengths and weaknesses. That there's obviously competitive depth there, despite it obviously being quite a lot more accessible. But I don't know how you guys got on with it relative to that.
Not played it yet. I've only seen the trailers. And actually it's weird, the trailer's quite bad at telling you what it is. And in fact, the only way I could get at what the game was to watch like a 2.5 hour live stream they put on YouTube and on their channel, where the first match doesn't even begin until like 20 minutes in. So I find it very hard to get an impression of what it was actually going to be like to play.
I played it very, very briefly when it came out whilst drunk for like 15 minutes or something, and I didn't really get the hang of it. I found it weird that I'm going to play more and I'll give it a proper chance. But the first thing that sort of I stuck on was you are like the cursor, except that you have health, like things can shoot you. And that seems to be bad. The whole controller vibrates and stuff. And what I wanted to do was like tell my rocket launcher guys to attack that building, and to do that I might be wrong, but I felt like I had to run over to that building and then press the button and then run back, and in doing so got shot a lot. And it felt like that was a weird disconnect between the thing I wanted to do is just tell them attack that building, but I had to do something physical to communicate that, and there was an actual danger to doing the physical thing. I was actually punished for the physical part of it.
So you know that thing you were saying about, like, if you're going to do one thing different, do, like, one thing differently and do nothing else differently. It's a game that does quite a few things differently, and I think that's one of the things that's the weirdest to consider. So you do have health. You are also the cursor. You have a few different things. So if you run over to a place and press either the left mouse button for a specific unit or right mouse button for all units, you will set like a go here order for that place, which also includes kill things that are here. That's implied. It's basically just attack move. It's like the RTS, but it's only got attack move, just as a sort of simplification thing. Then you can run away again, and that will happen. However, if you want to intensify how much damage you do to a thing, you can hold that button while standing next to the thing you want to kill, and you'll wave the flag more intensely, which will cause you to do more damage at the cost of the fact that you'll soak up more hits. When you leave combat, I don't know if you're just out of combat for a certain amount of time, or if it's when you return to your territory, because the map's quite small, you regenerate health really quickly. So it's not like you're then wounded for ages. You're just like almost back to full health straight away. But there's this sort of like, sort of tug of war of like how long you can afford to wave the flag a lot, and then versus having to get out. But dying isn't like game over. If you die, you just have like a respawn time, which isn't mega long, like, but it's obviously, it means that all your units have to go on. It's like the last order you gave until you're back. So if you kill the enemy general, you'll probably win that fight because they can't give orders for a bit. But it's not like Supreme Commander. Like, I think sometimes it's tempting to think of it like Supreme Commander, where you have like, you are a commander unit, where it's not really like you are a sort of disposable, cursor, basically. But the cursor can die, like StarCraft. But what if someone killed your hand? is a way of thinking about it. And you have some other powers that become more important as well. Like if you hold down R, you dig into the ground, and then you can pick any of your windmills, which are basically your bases, to reappear at, which means you can fast travel from anywhere on the map back home or to any place you control really quickly. Which again is kind of interesting mechanics, adds like a kind of town portal scroll system to the RTS, where you don't just get to click on a different area of the minimap to suddenly be controlling there. You have to go there. It makes, I don't know, I think there's like quite a lot of interesting design space unlocked by the notion that the cursor is a physical thing on the battlefield that the players can interact with and put at risk or try and play safe with and that kind of thing. So yeah, like you learn quickly, like, oh, it's actually okay if I soak up damage for a bit. Like success looks like successfully waving the flag really intensely so that all of the enemies die and you survive with 2 health, because that means you've judged it absolutely perfectly. Failure looks like dying halfway through your flag waving attempt because you misjudged how much stuff they were going to bring to bear, that kind of thing. So
I think it's important that the listeners know that every time you talk about flag waving, you do a weird kind of crotch stirring gesture.
I was waving a little flag.
Well, I'm sitting opposite you.
I don't know if it was important that they knew that.
It's important for me. Sorry, Tom, you were saying.
That makes more sense. I didn't know there was any benefit to me being there, and that sort of justifies it, I think.
Good. Yeah, so that's been... I'm still super early in it, but I'll definitely keep playing. And it does look great, and I'd the theme is really cool. It's nice to see. Just it looks original. That you could have done that theme with anything, and and not that Animal People at War has not been done before, but it's like its commitment to its kind of grim, kind of people's revolution thing is pretty admirable.
I liked how it pared things down, because I've never really got on with RTS, and I liked that I didn't have as much to worry about. I actually beat Adam when we played it at GDC. That might have been because he was also trying to interview the developer at the time, but we played twice and I won both of them, I think.
That's fine, that's scientifically proven.
And I feel like that's fine. And I challenged him to a rematch now that we have, like, copies of it. And he wouldn't. So I think that's a default win for forever. To me.
Good to know.
I have a funny feeling it might have been called Armada before, which is a terrible name for it, obviously.
Yeah. That rings a bell for me as well.
I imagine that's why they changed it. Maybe it was going to be about boats at one point. Sure isn't now.
Sure ain't about boats. You know what else ain't about boats?
It's got a slightly weird... I was surprised by what happens between the levels. You go back to kind of like...
A big pub.
Yeah. And it's like kind of an RPG, and you walk around and talk to NPCs and stuff and get...
Yeah, there's quite a lot of writing. And the writing's pretty good. Like, it's grim, like I say. Because the person you play in the revolutionary that you play in the campaign, at least at the start, is somebody who's gone to war because one of the other factions ate his son. And that kind of happens at the start. It opens with like, you know, we were proud to bring meat into our family until they ate you, my son. Now, People's Revolution. Lots of flag waving. It's good. It's 15 quid, came out yesterday.
Could you have some kind of Pyrrhic victory wherein you lose, but you poison yourself so that the side that eats you also dies?
That's probably not possible within the context of the game.
I would do that.
But is a fine...
Out of spite.
A fine bit, yeah. It's the way you GG.
It's kind of like rage quitting life.
What,
screwing other people over.
Yes, that's not possible, I don't think, within the game's mechanics.
You're sinking low.
I'm not pandering to this. I'm not going to help it anymore.
It's not pandering to raise your microphone. It's pandering to lower yourself to its level. You're literally lowering yourself to your level.
It's attention seeking.
How is it that you always manage to get the droopy microphone?
Well, certain people lay out the microphones and I just add my chair.
I can't tell the difference when I'm setting them out.
Well, last week
somehow...
we only had 2.
And yet...
Still...
Amazing. Well, that's obviously an unanswerable mystery.
Noise of Pip shuffling a little further down.
Yeah.
Tom, we should talk briefly about your XCOM adventures, because I know they're ongoing.
Yeah.
Well documented on Twitter. It's been very entertaining.
Yep. I'm playing War of the Chosen, which is the new expansion, and I agree with everything Tom said last time we talked about it. Both good and bad. The overworld stuff, the geoscape, is just absurdly overwhelming now. I'm actually playing, and I recommend this if anyone has not started yet. When you start the campaign, in the options there is an option to increase the length of the avatar project to twice as long. So the enemy, basically the clock that is ticking up, that is the doom clock, you have twice as much breathing room there. And I'm really glad I did that, because the Chosen are fucking you up all the time. I've also got the Alien Hunters DLC installed, and I've got Shen's Gift installed. Shen's Gift only helps you if you're not actually doing the quests. I don't remember actually choosing this, but in this run through, I haven't been presented with the Shen's Gift missions, but I have all the cool items that you can get from it, and they're just really powerful weapons. The Alien Hunters, though, which I actually hadn't played to any extent before, are bosses that show up in certain missions, and they are at least as nasty as the Chosen, perhaps nastier. And so I'm dealing with 3 of those and the 3 Chosen. So almost every mission has some ultra impossible boss on it. And that can just, it doesn't seem to me that there's any intelligence or auto-balancing in when they show up. Well, I've never had them both in the same thing. Obviously, the Chosen themselves can't overlap, and I think the Chosen can't overlap with the alien rulers. But in terms of I just had I fought the Chosen Warlock, and he showed up at the same time that I aggroed 4 chrysalids, and the first ever time I fought a gatekeeper, which is the giant robot sphere. All those things happened, and that's when the Warlock showed up, and he summons zombies and makes himself invincible. Yeah. And it was just worst case scenario. And so it's really volatile. It's just totally random what the difficulty of the mission is going to be. It will just vary from trivially easy to insanely difficult at the drop of a hat. And it won't match up at all to what it says the mission is going to be in terms of difficulty. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's kind of fun, but the geoscape nagging is just intolerable at this point. I was never a big fan of that side of the game, the base building and the scanning things and always being interrupted. You're always trying to pick up these resources and it keeps interrupting you. Now it interrupts you 4 times as often, and so you can't get anything done. I'm just trying to pick up this one little pile of resources and been interrupted like 5 times for different things nagging me to go away, and each time you've got to quit out of that interface, go into a different interface, do something, and then when you go back, for some reason it keeps forcing the camera back to the Reaper HQ where you're not even where your ship is, and then you have to manually go back to or you can click a button to go back to the ship and then figure out what you're doing. That part is now, for me, just a net negative. I would just like the game more if it simply wasn't there. If you just took away all of the base building, all of the geoscape, and just between each mission I just get to choose what kit to give my soldiers, and that's it. But the thing I'm really loving, I was not prepared for how huge a feature the poster thing is. I'm making posters of every mission I ever go on. And the interface for doing that is really good. It's very easy to make really cool looking lineups of your guys. It's really easy to make funny ones. And it's also just, I don't know, it feels like it's the only part of XCOM that isn't overwhelming and stressful. It's like a nice break between you finish a mission on the tactical layer, and rather than having to go straight back into the overwhelming, terrifying geoscape base building stuff where at any point you might be making a fatal mistake, you get to just play around and do some arts and crafts and make some propaganda. Yep.
It's dry macaroni night on The Avenger.
It's also enhanced by, as usual, I did a sign up on Twitter for people who wanted to be in my squad, and I'm picking names from that. So all the people on my team are real people, most of whom I know.
Can I be on your squad?
Sure.
Can I be on your squad?
So there's a bit of a backlog in terms of
that's fine.
450 people signed up for this.
Oh shit!
Do I not get benefits from being right next to you right now?
I am cherry picking people I know because it's just more interesting for me if they're people I know. It's funnier if they die. But I have a backlog even of people I know. But yeah, so that makes it funny to make posters of those and then send those posters to those people on Twitter and tell them what they got up to. Also, when someone dies, you get to make a memorial poster, and then those posters show up in the levels as well. Which, the first time it was actually, kind of annoying because there are lots of opportunities to make posters. I love making posters, but there are, if anything, too many opportunities to make posters. Every time every soldier gets promoted, you're prompted to make a poster for that. And I don't usually, because I've just made a poster about the mission. I've made a poster about every friendship that forms. I've made posters about everyone who died. And then it's like, everyone who got promoted? No, if you got promoted, well done, but I'm not making a poster about you.
It's like you've just discovered university activism.
But if you don't do it, the game automatically does it for you and saves that image. And then that's also left in the pool with all your real ones for the game to draw on to put in the levels. And it's quite rare to see them in the levels, so it's quite a nice special thing. And when it's just an auto-generated one, it's like, oh, fuck. Because it will be some shitty slogan that's just picked out of, and the colors are terrible. The random generator is really, I think, knowingly bad. So the first time I saw it wasn't that great, but then the next time I saw one was, I had a bizarre situation where I was actually really disappointed because someone died, but they died on the first leg of a 2-leg mission. And so at the end of the second leg was when we actually had the sort of post-mission debrief and stuff. And she just wasn't there. She wasn't shown as dead. She wasn't shown as living. She just simply wasn't on that list. And so I never got the chance to make a memorial poster for her. And this was Claudia Lowe, I think is a listener, right?
Yeah,
and I was quite sad about that. And then later I discovered something had gone wrong with her death, and
well, I mean,
I was being
asking her about it.
Mistakes were made, and I was being prompted to promote a soldier in my armory, which is unusual because usually when a promotion happens at the end of a mission, you just do it then and there. And when I looked at the list, it was her. She had a promotion. I remember her getting promoted the moment she died, because the way she died was to shoot a flamethrower guy at point blank range with a,
Yes.
and those can blow up, and she got promoted for the kill and then killed by the death. And so, but because she was in the list there, I could access her, and she had this weird sort of blank character sheet where she was a sort of a non-class. There's just like a black gap where the icon for her rank should be.
Oh, wow.
But importantly, there was a make poster option, so I was able to make a poster of her, and I made a poster of her that just said "promoted to death" and on a black background. And then the first time I saw one of my own posters, it was in like an office, and it was just that floor to ceiling, right next to someone's desk. So it was like a motivational poster.
Amazing.
And it just fitted perfectly. Like, this is usually they're being. The implication is the Resistance have put these posters up to celebrate celebrate you guys as heroes. But in this case, because it was in an office environment, it just looked like Advent had put this up to scare people. Like, you work with another guy, you just die.
People don't even know that you died. I love that XCOM, with this system and putting it in the game world and encouraging it so much, is sort of embracing the fact that it's profoundly silly.
Yeah.
Like, it's been not necessarily clear what the sort of intended tone of new XCOM was. Not totally, like, 'cause it takes itself relatively seriously. It's obviously cartoony and kind of daft, but
I think it's quite action movie in its script, and especially in like the chosen introduction sequences, it gets very kind of like, you know, it's the sort of thing you'd see in a like a superhero movie or something.
yeah, but it's not like, it's always been cartoony, but it's not like, it doesn't have jokes in it, really. Apart from jokes you bring with you.
I think I assumed that the XCOM franchise was relatively serious, because the games events that I've been to around it were always relatively po-faced.
Sorry.
Oh, no. But always, like, I think as well, the fact that it is the type of game that it is, like, the mechanics are very sort of for people who take the game seriously. So I think that there's a slight level of making an assumption based on the fact that it is like a game where you need to pay attention and you need to sort of plan and you need to have that strategic sensibility. It's sort of, it doesn't necessarily make you think this will be a ruffle fest.
But that said, though, like, the reason people get attached to them, they name characters after their mates, is because people die in spectacularly unlikely ways, and the sort of the systems-iness of it does create slapstick.
It does.
The cover for XCOM 2 was an alien face made out of human skulls, like 1 million human skulls.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Tonally diverse.
But the thing is, like, the fact that you could do slapstick with it didn't feel like you were necessarily supposed to. Like, you can do stupid things in Dishonored, but that doesn't feel like a silly game, right?
No, but I think it was like a feature of XCOM that now feels like an actual feature, because these
Well, it
posters
feels like they've embraced it, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean, I guess. Like, it feels like them embracing the silly side of XCOM.
It does have big silly snake men in it. Like, they didn't have to put the snake men from XCOM 1 in, but they did, and they really they really leaned into it.
And now there's a boss snake, and if you kill a boss snake, you can wear the snake skin as a suit, and it's the silliest looking thing you ever seen.
Snake!
It also, it feeds into one of the core things about XCOM for me, which is just how cool your guys are. Like, once you level them up enough and you've customized them and you got attached to them, these people just are like heroes to you. They're just such badasses. I've got, my favorite is Amanda Williams, who is a Templar, which is one of the new classes, and they don't have a main weapon. They just have they don't have a main gun. They have two sort of lightsabers, basically, or sort of like light spikes on their fists, and they can run up and stab people with them, and then even if they don't kill them, they get another move to sort of back up and to get to safety. But then pretty soon you unlock parry, which means you stay where you are, and you just, the next attack against you won't work. You just block it no matter what it is, which is awesome. And then also, these new classes they have a chance to also be able to pick some skills from the normal skill trees for the other classes. And she happened to get Blade Storm, which is the ranger thing that if anyone comes near you on the enemy turn, you get a free attack against them with your melee weapon. And her melee weapon is awesome to begin with, and then also every time she kills someone, it gets more powerful. And so now she can run in, stab somebody, and then she just stands there right in their face. She's invincible to the next attack, and if they try and get away, she gets a free attack against them. And if anyone else comes near her, she also gets a free attack against them. And it's just incredible. She'll just like shred a whole squad.
Yeah, they sort of break the game, which is brilliant, because so do the bad guys. Like, they both reach a power level, it feels like they're breaking XCOM systems.
Yeah, actually, so the alien rulers of the Alien Hunter DLC, their crazy thing is that for every move you do, they get a move, which is just absolutely absurd. And the skirmisher.
Is that not how turn-based things work?
No.
No, sorry. For every move anyone on your squad takes, they get a move immediately. So while you're managing all 6 of your guys, every single action you do.
You take a turn and they take a turn.
Yeah, so in
that
theory,
you take a turn within your turn and they do.
And because everyone gets 2 actions, in theory, they could take 12 turns on your turn.
Okay.
And then at the highest level, the new skirmisher class gets that. So you can just do that to the enemies. Like every time an enemy does anything, you get to take a move.
Apparently, I think there's something that gives poison or a bleeding effect, and that's really effective against those guys because every time they respond with a move, they take the poison damage, and it kills them really quickly.
That's awesome. The other thing...
I've got amazing reflexes, but I'm extremely poisoned.
My immune system is fucking
terrible.
Terrible.
Yeah, it makes sense. It'd be like a metabolism thing.
So ill right now.
Yeah, your circulation system would just be pumping
that's true, actually.
through your veins so
like
quickly.
Chris Traeger from Parks and Rec. He's really healthy, but because he's so healthy, his body's super sensitive to any toxins. The other thing I really love about it is the new soldier bond system, where when soldiers have randomized compatibilities with each other, and then when they go through things on missions, that bond increases, and they're obviously the threshold for them to officially form a bond is going to be reached with someone they have high compatibility with, usually. And once they form that first level bond, they get a thing where one of them can give an action to the other one, so they can spend one of their actions, and instead their friend gets it. And that's sort of fictionalized as like them encouraging them, like sort of cheering them on, like they say things like, "We can do it," or "No one can stop you."
Do an action.
I haven't done an action, so
Tom,
you can do an action.
Tom,
it's all right.
do an action.
I've got it, man.
And then my first soldier bond was between Nico and Fiona, and Nico is support and Fiona is a ranger. And they also became my highest level troops, and so they went on as many missions as I could put them on. And so they got really high level, and their bond got really high level, and now they've got a whole load of different bond abilities. But one of them is that if either of them ends a movement next to the other one, they are both cured of any negative mental effects. It's called Stand By Me, which is really cute. It's just like, just being near each other, just like,
I'm
cures
not on
them
fire anymore.
Negative mental effects.
Okay.
So, unless it's a fire of the mind, that wouldn't work. And I had an amazing moment where my last 2 units with moves were, Fiona was out in the open, and she got attacked with mind control, but it didn't work. She resisted it, but in the process of resisting it, panicked, which is in some ways worse, because when you're mind controlled, you can kill the thing that's mind controlling you, and that cures it. But panic is just panic. Usually you can't get rid of it very easily. And Nika was nearby, and so Nika could run out and calm her down, basically. Except that Fiona was at the only patch of cover in a wide open space. There was no space adjacent to her that Nika could go to that would be in cover. And Nika only had one move, so once she moves there, she's stuck there for the alien turn. But I did it anyway, and had Nika run out to reassure Fiona. Fiona was cured but from her panic just by Nika being near her. And then that immediately gave me control of her, and she had one action left. And because of that teamwork thing, I was able to have Fiona give her action back to Nika so that Nika could run to cover and get back to safety. It was a really neat little mechanical thing. It also like told a little story of their friendship and like how they helped each other.
Hey, calm down. No, I'm fine. Go away.
That's really awesome.
That's great. I really want to play it. It's because we're having such a crazy run of things coming out, because like new Dishonored is out.
Yeah.
Very, very imminently. And Destiny and everything else, it's the game I've put on the list for like Christmas or when things calm down. Because I figure it's not only going to get better as XCOM tends to, but yeah, it's great.
There's also a challenge mode, which I haven't touched yet. It's like a daily challenge with randomized units and enemies. And apparently that also includes like aliens. You can have aliens on your team. I'm really interested to try it, but I'm trying to finish this goddamn campaign, and it's taken an incredibly long time. It's the only game I play at the moment, really, and it's kind of my break game, which is it's not a great fit for breaks because it takes like an hour to play any mission. But it is a good way to disengage from anything else because it'll consume your entire brain.
Rad.
Shall we do questions?
You sound extremely weary about that, but only because I made you say it again.
Yes. And you will know whether Chris left that in or not.
Guess what? I'm cutting it out.
Lame.
Well, you're just going to have to live with it.
Oh my god, cut this whole bit. Can we do questions?
Yes, absolutely. For the third time.
Ugh.
It's always a bit of a stumbling block, this bit.
Yeah, it's weird. Maybe we should just add a jingle or something. Right, rather
now
than
it's fucking questions.
Questions.
I'm actually just cutting out this. Let's do some questions.
Hang on, no, because it would need to go up at the end because questions. So it'd be questions.
I'm cutting into this now.
Ah!
Why can't I stop cutting in? Who
Tom's
knows?
a musician. He'll know. How do you make a song sound like a question?
You just did it.
Oh.
Perfect first time.
That was the 5th time.
And also the second time of singing.
Close enough for jazz.
Rapidly becoming the Tom Senior catchphrase. That is what's on your XCOM death poster.
I think about it all the time. It's part of my internal, dialogue.
Yeah. Like Marsh's palate cleansing citrus.
Yeah.
This is
you'll
what's
remember
the
that.
Catchphrase?
Yeah, ask him about it sometime. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but if there's anything I learned about Marsh in the 2 years I lived with him, don't say that phrase around him.
But also that he leaves pictures of goblins with their penises out in unexpected places.
Palate cleansing goblin penis. Yeah. Sorry.
Really, though?
I didn't want to say that, but I did.
Goblin penis sorbet.
Yeah. Nothing good lies that way, down that conversation hole.
Something wicked this week, guys.
Aw. I wish we'd just done questions.
Well, you had that choice.
I did have that
This
choice.
is on you.
I thought it was riffing, we were bouncing ideas back and forth,
But
flowing
how does that always go?
badly.
People get
Right.
hurt.
Never do that again. Scripted podcast from now on only.
Yes.
Travis writes, "Hello, waffle and butter." I love that this pun game has just become nouns.
What it is.
Nouns.
This is surreal
Is
now.
that a thing? Do you put butter on waffles?
Yeah.
Isn't it waffles
do.
and syrup?
Yeah, syrup as well.
Or waffles and bacon?
I don't know about Americans, actually. I don't know. I think they have no, they do, because they have you get like a dish of, it is butter, but it's like whipped cream butter in some way. It's like really fluffy.
Yeah, no, that's weird. I don't like that.
I'll take it, any kind of butter.
Heard it here first, folks. Tom Francis. That's it on his XCOM poster. Any kind of butter on a waffle.
My memorial poster when I die. That's how he died.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the sectoids that got him. It was any kind of butter.
That I can't believe it's
It was
not
lost butter, the butter that's left over in the cities that have turned to the zombies.
The rest of Travis's email after the first 4 words. Proceed.
Which we've now thoroughly discussed.
I'd like to quickly apologise for seeming mean towards Tom F. for my last few questions. Someone's personal opinions being objectively wrong should not be held against them.
Doesn't seem that sorry.
So actually, I think Travis genuinely was sorry, because when we skipped questions last week, this is one of the ones that was sent in for last week's pod that we skipped because we didn't do questions last week. He popped up in Discord to explicitly ask that you got the message that he's sorry about being mean.
It still didn't refrain from continuing to be mean, though.
That's true.
You didn't refrain from being wrong, though.
I think I did, actually. I think I never actually went to that place.
I don't remember what it was that you were wrong about.
In any case, he continues, unrelated, I think, to the subject of Tom's rightness or wrongness.
Well, he's wrong about the butter, so...
He didn't say anything about the butter.
He's put it with a waffle.
Even your opening was wrong in this email.
Oh, boy.
Okay, this is going to take a time.
It is. He goes on to write, the lovely Matt Lees recently published a video of a presentation he gave at Gamescom Congress. The link will be in the show notes. It's a good watch, and as a hobbyist game developer, raised a lot of difficult questions in my mind. He spoke briefly of Brenda Romero's The Mechanic is the Message idea, which I thought was super interesting. Can you think of a mechanic from a recent mainstream game that reflected a socially positive message? The example that most readily springs to mind for me is trade agreements in strategy games that are cancelled upon declarations of war. It has a real peace and trust can win the day glow to it. Love, Travis, aka TJ House in Discord.
Yeah, I'll just say that my XCOM teamwork story earlier is a pretty perfect example of that, I think.
If you're feeling bad, just ask a friend to stand next to you so you can tell them to go away.
Just mechanics that represent nice stories.
Yeah. Yeah, rewarding kind of just people helping in that way without kind of negative consequences.
Yeah, it's funny, that, like, as soon as I sort of experienced that, I wondered why that isn't more common. Like, there's obviously, like, healing in games and stuff, but XCOM breaking it down into that much more emotional level of, like, this person is scared and this person makes them feel better, is XCOM proves immediately that has obvious combat utility. It makes sense in a war zone situation. It's not like a stretch. You know, it's very hard to make richly mechanical games about social interactions that are totally divorced from the more traditional settings of games of combat and danger. But a lot of those little moments and emotional rules and stuff do map quite well onto like a combat situation, so it doesn't seem like a huge stretch. I'm surprised it hasn't been done more and sooner.
I mean, it's interesting that you say healing, because like the easiest way to feel like everyone hates you is to be a healer in a game, because not only will no one ever acknowledge when you do heal them, they'll shout at you if you don't manage to for some arcane reason. So it's like, that's an interesting one of like a thing which is technically you helping that ends up feeling like the worst role in the game that no one wants to play most of the time.
I think that's the thing. I think games are pretty bad at providing opportunities to be generous in a real sense. Like, often if you are generous in an RPG, as in the kind of, no, you don't give me any rewards kind of sense, you're doing it because it'll give you the light side points that ultimately mean that your friend won't die. Like, which is not charity. Similarly, like, you know, we've spoken about it in different contexts before, but I'm always fascinated by the kind of the absence of real material consequences in The Sims, which is a game that kind of purports to be about real life. But the kind of concept of giving people things in charity doesn't really exist outside of sort of fixed interactions that are built around the idea of gift giving, but don't really have any material consequences for the people involved. Because everyone's kind of like, you know, you live in a world where hunger exists, but your fridge contains infinite cheap yogurt. So which is not, you know what I mean?
To be fair, with enough milk, you too can have infinite cheap yogurt.
That's not quite the same.
I'm just helping.
What I'm saying is, like, The Sims would be really interesting if, like, real serious material want could exist in its world, so that you might have the neighbor who's, you know, you can genuinely just give up some of your resources to help out by cooking them some dinners and having them brought round. You know, like real life stuff that kind of maps onto, like, genuine social messages.
Yeah, Rebecca's diary, Alice and Kev, is an amazing expose on The Sims' inability to handle this, which is just merely an excuse for us to link that in the show notes again.
Yeah.
I couldn't decide when I had my XCOM story. Afterwards, I thought, like, as I was doing it, I knew I did it because I actually knew it would pay off mechanically. I knew that by calming her down, when Nika saved Fiona, it was a value judgment on my part that I thought it was worth putting in her risk to get Fiona back. It was too much of a problem. And so everything I did was pragmatically motivated. I was looking at what the best solution to this puzzle was. And I could see that it was going to make a great story, and I was pleased by that. But I wasn't doing it because of the emotional connection these characters had. I was doing it because of the rules, which is derived from that. And I couldn't decide whether that was good or bad. Whether it was like, on one level, I'm impressed that the game's mechanics work in this way. That they have made it so that following the emotional rules of your characters is beneficial. That's a really difficult and good thing to do. But then I also wondered, was this rendered meaningless by the fact that it was just profitable for me? It was just, it paid off. So it wasn't there. I think that the thing that wasn't in that thing, that it sounds like there's an element of sacrifice in the story, but in the mechanics, there isn't any sacrifice because everyone's doing the thing that benefits all of us best.
Well, also, like, you have that situation where the game has bonded those characters, and so it also prioritizes some relationships over others, you know, just through mechanical, you know, determination that these two were compatible, and then they formed a bond, and it's like, okay, well, it's not like your squad mates get human benefits from human interaction. It's that these two people are bonded in a very hyper specific way with particular rules attached to it. So I think I'm more inclined to sort of, the question made me think of things more like Journey, you know, where players want to play with each other or help each other or lead each other, or, you know, that kind of thing. And it also put me in mind of the, firstly, the ways that this isn't to do with game mechanics themselves, but the ways that game developers try to add extra layers to reward good behavior and to gamify people into being human to each other, which is a worrying thing in its necessity, but also an interesting exercise, and when it works, it can be really cool. But also, sort of a hybrid between the two is the guided games thing in Destiny that I think we've spoken about a little bit before, which is the thing where essentially Bungie are trying to make it easier for solo players to find pickup groups for activities, while still kind of knowing the types of people or the play style that they're getting into. So you'll have less of that mismatch of somebody who's hyper competitive ending up in a chill out group, or vice versa. And also, you know, that you'll have groups of people who are willing to shepherd like newcomers through a thing without getting stressed or whatever, and that there would be these ways to encourage those interactions, because it was happening organically in the original Destiny anyway. And so I think it behoves Bungie to bring it in-house and try and make it even more of a feature, because it's a nice thing, and it's an easy kind of win on their part for making their community seem, you know, super positive and cool.
I think I've had quite a lot of good experiences recently, both in Destiny 2 and Absolver, with games that have kind of just like anonymous ambient co-op in them, because they provide opportunities for objective-minded players or min-maxing players to completely breeze by fellow players in need. But you can also stop and help, and there is actually a genuine... You don't gain anything mechanically from stopping and helping with either a boss fight in Absolver that you've done before, or with a public event in Destiny that you don't specifically need to do, quote-unquote, for whatever thing you're working towards. You'll get something from it, but you know what I mean? You might know that you've done your tally of public events for the day or for now or whatever. But I find it hard in both that game and in Absolver to like pass by a player who's on their own in the middle of a public event or trying to fight. You know, Absolver's bosses are specifically designed to be fought by multiple players at once. So like you see someone trying them by themselves, and like the knowledge that this system means I can help, and that help will be directly meaningful to like another human being somewhere in the world who might be struggling with this boss. But honestly, you can look and at a glance see if they're struggling with it. And there's like, that is, I think, an opportunity to be genuinely generous with your time in terms of just stopping and saying like, hey man, don't worry, I'll get this. And you kind of run in and peel away one of the fighters and fight them yourself and deal with them for that person. And then you can be chill about it and like let them finish off the boss if they need, or if they get in trouble, step in. And I really like that system. Destiny 2 has a similar thing where you see someone struggling in a public event, you can dive in and help out. That sort of thing
did that sort of thing as well, didn't it? Like
you had to actively summon people.
Yeah, but I mean, there were people who were deliberately setting out to help people, or, you know, the flaw messages could be, you know, they could be really, you know, messing you around, but, you know, there were also a mechanism of communicating and stuff. And I think some of that, I mean, it wasn't, I don't think it's quite what the question is asking about, because it's not quite something that is built in as a positive mechanical thing, unambiguously rather. But it was nice to see that people did use those more neutral things for good as well as for japes.
In The Witcher 3, you can refuse payment on the grounds of compassion of a lot of missions. And that mechanic just ends there, really. It's just you do it for your own self-fulfillment, your own kind of enjoyment. Obviously, you lose out of the game, but if you want to roleplay Geralt as a kind of Robin Hood and not a kind of mercenary, then that's where the game gives you a choice, which is nice.
That's good.
Yeah, I really, really dislike it when turning down payment ends up being the most profitable option as well.
Yeah.
Like BioShock was the worst for this, where not quite the same situation, but saving the little sisters, it was presented as this difficult moral choice of like, oh, you get way more profit from harvesting them, but obviously the morally right thing to do is to save them. But then if you save them, you get a huge reward for it that far outweighs the reward you get for harvesting them. So there is no choice.
Yeah, precisely. When it's too transactional, I think that's when it loses it. That's why I think I like it in co-op games, because anytime you can give the player just the freedom to give selflessly, then most players won't, but it's nice because then maybe that's the thing.
MMOs were good for that.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, exactly. Destiny being good for it as well. Like, that's the nice thing about having those co-op systems that provide that headroom. I don't think you can ever expect most players to do it. I don't know if it's possible to have a mechanic where most players give selflessly, but there is a difference between, like making everything a transaction and having some things that are just, you do this because you feel like being nice to a digital person, which is sometimes a real person. Next question, question 2, comes from Kane, who writes, Dear Tomph, what do you suppose your playtime breakdown in XCOM 2 War of the Chosen is right now, between the tactical combat, the geoscape, and elaborately posing soldiers for humorous propaganda posters to share on Twitter? Regards, Kane.
Okay, I think it's about, for a mission, if a mission took like 30 minutes, sometimes it takes a bit longer, I reckon I spend about 20 minutes making posters and 20 minutes on the geoscape. There's a lot of poster time.
A lot of arts and crafts. Next question.
Arts and spacecrafts.
Nice.
Thanks.
Good.
What?
Bant distributed.
Yeah.
Dudley writes, Greetings, generic container and tool. Tag yourself, I'm tool. I've recently returned to gaming after many, many years away, building a PC to indulge myself in a burgeoning Steam library. Yesterday, I completed Playdead's rather excellent Inside, and immediately turned to older episodes of CNC to rediscover the team's opinions on the game. I was surprised to hear Chris estimate it to be a 3-hour game. I completed it in 9 hours and felt that I was doing so fairly swiftly. I was never bored, super stuck, or particularly frustrated. Acknowledging that more experience in games means that players will be better in general over time, are time estimates, particularly from those who play games as a living or as an intense hobby, valuable at all? Thank you for all your excellent work. Sincerely, Dudley.
There's a good website called, I think, How Long to Beat?
Yeah.
How Long to Beat. And it's a sort of a sort of crowdsourced service that will tell you, on average, people took 2.5 hours to complete this game, or 3.5 hours with all the collectibles, or 4 hours to 100% it. And it seems to have a good number of a good amount of data. I was curious about whether Tacoma or Gone Home was longer for most people.
What was the answer?
It turns out Tacoma is slightly longer. Gone Home is sort of 2 and a bit hours, and Tacoma is more like 3. My perception was that Tacoma felt shorter to me, but I wasn't sure if that was just, it was years since I played Gone Home. So the thing I have noticed is that people are terrible at self-reporting this. They have very wrong ideas of how long things took. And so for Heat Signature, I actually added a game time clock. I suppose I haven't thought about whether I'm going to take this out for release, but for testing, I wanted people to be able to actually see in like a hard measurement of how long they spent in the game, so that when we ask them, if you liberated all the strongholds, how long did that take you? They don't have to guess, because if they guess, it'll just be meaningless data.
I find that I can totally see where the guy's coming from, because game time does vary tremendously, and I think it's becoming less important. Like, I certainly don't think it has a huge relationship with the value of the game, at least not to me necessarily. However, I do find it helpful when people can explain to me the rough kind of time band that games fit into. Because I think maybe being too specific is always going to have some inaccuracy. But it's nice to know short, medium, and long is sort of... I found myself, well, to put it a different way, I found myself recently prioritizing games like XCOM, for example, based on the fact that I know I have limited time for them now. And a lot of indie games that I pick up and play, or any game that I pick up and play, I'm probably not going to play for much more than 3 hours most of the time. So it's nice knowing, like, oh, this is one of the games that you can get everything out of, or get a substantial amount out of in 3 to 6 hours. It was helpful for me to know that Absolver's kind of open world single player element was not a full Dark Souls, but was more like a sort of 7-8 hour tutorial intro to a multiplayer game, because that helped me kind of understand how much investment it was going to ask of me and made me more willing to kind of go through with it. Like, it's been a long time since I've finished like a big single player game. I think Mass Effect Andromeda probably was the last one, because that investment's harder to commit nowadays, and only a few games get it. So it's always helpful to know in advance, I think, like, this is a 20 to 40 hour game. This is a 3 to 10 hour game.
I'd like the evening to be a unit of measurement, because I think if I know that something is 40 hours or something, then it'll probably take more than a week of evenings consecutively. It's like, that's too much for my current schedule, and so that'll be a thing that I either won't finish and just need a taster of, or it'll get put on the back burner. Whereas if it's like, it is an evening or 2 evenings worth of play, that's a thing that I can do outside my job.
It should scale like the Heat Signature difficulty system. It should go evening, week, 2 weeks, month, and mistake.
I think, but the other thing is that sometimes it can help get a feel for the game in a different way. Like, I think I mentioned this when I was talking about Pillars of the Earth, because that's something that I wouldn't have actually gravitated towards if Adam hadn't asked me to review it. Because I would have looked at it and thought, this has all of the trappings of a 40-hour game, you know, like, this is a thing that will be long. And having seen how many pages the book it's based on is, this is going to be a long thing. And then it was surprisingly pacey and zippy, and it was like, oh, okay. So I actually did include, you know, I think you could do this in an afternoon or a day at the most, if, you know, because for me, that was a thing that would have actually pushed me towards thinking I was going to enjoy it, rather than going, oh yeah, but it'll be really dense and really long and I won't have time for it, you know?
Yeah.
The next question comes from James, who does not presuppose that games journalists are overly good and quick at completing games. He writes, Dear Loot Chest and Nerfbat, happy 20Xth episode. Over 2 decades of playing games, I've seen the overall difficulty of games drop. I thought this was due to my increasing skill as the years go by. However, recent cries over the Crash Insane trilogy's difficulty and the rise of difficult almost as a genre has changed my mind. As games journalists, whom are generally thought to be less skilled at games, what's your take on the slow drop in difficulty of the average game? Cheers, James.
I disagree with the
I think we disagree with the premise quite a lot. So I would challenge the assertion that games have gotten easier, basically.
Yeah.
Anyone? Any other takers? Any other?
Yeah, I feel like there's lots of different threads of gaming have all just continued to exist. And there is a thread that's got better usability. There's been, if you go back and play a game from 10 years ago, probably one of the main things you notice is like the controls are a pain in the ass, or the camera is obstinate, or there's just some like just real problems that took designers a long time to figure out how to solve those, and a lot of testing, which was done less in the olden days. And so there is no, and also like things like quest compasses were pretty rare that long ago.
Or even checkpointing being bullshit, so like it forces
progress,
you to
So there's a lot of like, and that's just, there is now the mainstream of games tends to not have any of those stumbling blocks that or those super punishing elements that older games have. But there are also loads of games that do have those. Like that type of game continue to exist.
There's more games. You remind me, because I recently went back and played the first Hitman, Code M47, for a PC Gamer thing, because I'm writing there back, which is kind of the retro section of the magazine. I thought it'd be fun to go back and revisit it. And what's interesting about that game is it's from 2000. It's not... I thought of 2000. It's not being like old, but it's 17 years old.
Yeah, that's a while back.
And it's a train wreck. Like, it's basically uncontrollable. Like, they had no, it's amazing how bad its control scheme is. Like, in terms of any modern idea about usability or just consistency, like, having left and right mouse button. The right mouse button.
It's really hard to press that right mouse button. It's so small.
The right mouse button isn't what you'd expect. But like having even those two mouse buttons be inconsistently employed in what you do with them is like one of the sort of UX design things that games just got better at.
If I remember right, Hitman 1 had like mixed dual wielding, right? You could equip anything in one hand or any gun in one hand.
And you don't tell the game you want to do that. It just does that. And that might stop you from pressing a lift button. And now you can't go down the lift until you realize what the fuck has happened with your hands. It really is like, I don't want to crib for myself too much because I literally wrote this today. But it's a mess. But the thing about it is all the bare bones of Hitman are in there, including the kind of mission structure. But the missions are way simpler than any subsequent Hitman game. Like in terms of what you're being asked to do, it's almost refreshing. It's kind of nice to go back to Hitman being so easy with so few elements where you just have to do one thing, really.
Just like a guy in a park, and if you get to the right place, you can just shoot him.
Yeah, it's like the challenge is get a car bomb into this car. Here's the driver who's gotten out and walked around that corner and kind of staring at a bin you can push him in. Like, and that's that. It's so easy, really, from a kind of pure level design point of view. The only thing that makes it more punishing is the fact that the controls are a fucking disaster.
But we've kept that as well for Dota. Like, we're not a disaster, but you know what I mean? Like, it has kept so many unwieldy things.
But pointedly, Dota completely lost its old controls, which were completely unwieldy. Like, every character in Dota used to have the keys mapped to different keys for no reason.
Yeah, I was thinking, it really depends on where you look. Like, surely Dota 2, played it at the highest level, is one of the hardest games ever made.
Yeah, and yet its control system is fundamentally easier than the original version of the game.
Right, yeah.
And that doesn't change how difficult it is. I feel like the thing is that games have gotten, where games are difficult, they are more meaningfully difficult. It's not how the fuck do I get this to run, or how do I control this thing.
Yeah. That's what I meant, as in, like, we've kept all of the nonsense from Dota that makes it really difficult and like added more stuff that makes it, you know, like there's more stuff to learn fundamentally, but like the obstacles that didn't need to be there have been pared down or removed or changed, and so it's kind of like at the core it's still a difficult experience, it's just a different difficult experience.
I can't really imagine anyone being interested in like recapturing the days of like we had no fucking idea how to design a control scheme for a third-person game, so we did everything. Like, do you know what crouch is bound to on Hitman? Guess.
Delete.
Q.
No.
F3.
I was going to say F1.
X.
Numlock.
4. It's bound to 4. Guess what walking backwards is bound to?
Oh, come on. It can't be.
S.
No. S is turn around. Every now and then.
Oh, so X?
Delete?
X. It's bound to X.
That's right.
Yeah.
To try and map.
Because it's like WASD plus. It's a mess.
Remember Final Fantasy VII's control scheme, which was entirely on the numpad? You could play the entire game one-handed, I have done for many hours. It's pretty strange.
I remember when people used the numpad instead of...
Don't think about what it's too much.
I was going to move swiftly on.
That's when you really want to know how long the game is.
Kids.
Yeah, discs 2 and 3 are real.
Oh yeah. It's a slog.
I don't know whether I want to add my point now. Because we just keep giggling and thinking about other things. The other thing I was going to say was like it might be that the average difficulty of games has gone down, but that's because more people than ever are making more games than ever and more types of games, and so you know the addition of a whole bunch of exploration sims or like cool weird experiments which aren't difficult to interact with or wouldn't be put on that end of the scale, if you did want to classify them, will bring that average down. But that in and of itself isn't a bad thing either. And it's like, and I don't think that it affects the overall, read of that situation. I also wanted to just, like, when you mentioned about when we were talking about MOBAs, like, and time and things, like, it made me think of, for the previous question, like, obviously at this point with so many games that are super hungry for you to spend all of your time in them, like Dota or like Plunkbat or like League of Legends or whatever else, like, the idea of time relative to that is meaningless because like a tiny thing that takes an hour and a half versus the 2,000 hours you've plugged into something else. It's kind of like there's no scale. There's no, it's like this insignificant ant versus this cannonball,
It's funny. It's like someone should like say like, hey, do you want to, why not play, What Remains of Edith Finch? It's 4 games of Dota.
Yeah. You just need to find the relevant measure of everyone's time, right? It's like, that's 3 feature films, or that's like 2, I don't know, ragouts. I don't really know. Like, I'm hungry. It's...
That was... like, Look, we've got a lot of questions. I don't know if I can
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a Welshman in Dublin writes, Dear cargo containers and hyperspanners, are any of you Trekkies? I don't recall hearing you talk much about Star Trek on the pod, though I might be wrong. What's your favourite Star Trek video game, if any? Mine was Elite Force back in 2000. Played the shit out of that. Big shout out to my mate Matthew Griffith, who put me onto your pod a year ago. Please help me encourage him to find time to play Divinity Original Sin 2 with his friends when it's released. Yours, a Welshman in Dublin. Matthew Griffith, play Divinity Original Sin 2. Please.
DOS 2. It's DOS DOS.
2 DOS.
2.
That reminds me of a story, but I'm not going to tell because Pip will kill me.
Yeah. Next.
I like Star Trek.
Yes, good. I'm glad.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek.
What do you like about Star Trek?
Ooh. I know it's going to be an exam. I used to love
TNG and Voyager.
Yeah, I love Deep Space Nine the best, I'm afraid.
Really?
Interesting. I love them all though. I don't have any.
I quite like DS9 for how different it is.
So the initial thing that I liked about it was that the doors make a nice hiss when they open. And it was all about, like, when I was very young and I first saw Next Generation on TV, I was just captivated by, like, the nice future, like a utopian vision of humanity's future. And then Deep Space Nine really clicked with me when there was an episode where I was watching it and they're on this planet and they were up against the Dominion and it was going really badly, and you're always thinking when you're watching these things, like, how is this going to pan out for the good guys? And it just fucking didn't. It just ended and people died and it was just horrible. Wow. And I was like, holy shit, I didn't know you could do that. And also, in Deep Space Nine in particular, Bashir and O'Brien's friendship is just really, it feels really real and just human in a way that I didn't really get much of that from Next Generation, dipping in and out of it. And probably if you watch the whole thing, there's a lot more on the human relationship aspect, but that was they just kind of like hang out and do fun stuff together. And then also Garak in Deep Space Nine is my favourite Star Trek character, and he and Bashir have this brilliant like wry sort of friendship where they are friends, but also Bashir is not Garak is not telling him a million things and also might be a ruthless killer.
Like any good friendship.
There are complicated relationships, but they're more telegraphed, I guess. They're far less subtle and less, because there's obviously Riker and Troy have a thing, or did, and, Beverly Crusher and Picard have, like, their relationship thing, and, it's like, there's all this stuff, but it's very much, like, telegraphed, and it's quite sort of simple for the audience to pick up on.
TNG is a strange show. I really like it.
To be honest, I think TNG's best relationship is Q and Picard. Because it's so weird and funny and complicated and unreadable in some ways.
I was talking to my friend Will about this the other evening, Will Salmon, about how weirdly kind of randy the first couple of episodes of The Next Generation are. Like the first episode of The Next Generation opens with like Q dressed as like Sir Francis Drake out of nowhere on the bridge of the Enterprise. Then they go to like Tina Turner, Mad Max, sexy dystopian past for a bit. But then the entire episode is about two big space jellyfish getting it on.
Is that the one with the court case?
Yes, at the start, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the one after that is the one where everyone in the Enterprise is drunk and Tasha Yar shags Data.
Yeah.
Like episode 2.
I think
Very few shows get to like deep fandom shipping cuts, like straight the fucking way. It's not like mid-season 5. Those two finally get it on. It's like episode 2. Wesley's drunk. It's a comedy bottle episode, and we haven't even really started yet. It's a weird show.
Wasn't Wesley not drunk? He was like, he took control of the ship.
He did, but because everyone on the Enterprise was hammered for some reason.
Interesting.
That is.
Sorry, the question. Oh, sorry.
The best Deep Space Nine episode is there are so many Star Trek episodes where all the crew are acting strangely, and often there's like one who isn't, and they have to figure it out.
God, yeah.
And there's one where Mars O'Brien, it's called. Oh, is it called something like? Oh fuck, I can't remember what it's called. He is finding that the whole crew is acting really weird, and then he goes to Odo, who is the shapeshifter, who's usually immune to anything that's affecting like other species because he's just fundamentally unlike any other life form, and he's acting weird too. And you're sitting there just thinking, how the hell that just can't work? And the resolution of that is just brilliant. I'm not going to say what it is.
Damn it, I want to know now. I'm going to have to dig all this out.
So there's an episode called In the Pale Moonlight is not this episode. That's the other great one. That's a good Garak episode. This one might be called like Whispers or something like that. Sorry, I'll if I figure it out, I'll send it to you for the show notes, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Kez's story arc was fucking lame, though.
Is Kez a Voyager?
Oh, it might have been. Because I think I conflate them in a lot of ways, because they were on similar times on BBC Two. But like, because I've lumped her in with a whole bunch of DS9 characters, and I don't know why I would have done that mentally. Maybe I've just replaced a whole bunch of people in my head.
We should settle on best Star Trek games, though.
I remember liking Elite Force 2. I can't remember I think I might have skipped the original Elite Force at the time or something. It was dumb. I was annoyed at it for not being a faithful representation of Star Trek, because you just have like a phaser shotgun and a phaser rocket launcher, and you have like muscle contoured armor, which really did not feel very Star Trek. But it was a reasonably satisfying shooter, and I also really liked that this was clearly done for production economy, but there is a love interest in it, but you could also choose the gender of your main character, and they just didn't change anything about the relationship. So it's a woman, and she's just, I guess, canonically bi, because she will have the exact same relationship with you regardless of your gender, which is sort of accidentally progressive.
Yeah. It depends on whether or not she's bi or player sexual, which is the kind of the phrase.
Yeah. And also you can make the argument that maybe these two eventualities don't take place in the same reality, so if you players are male,
Star Trek solution to that problem as well.
I've played Star Trek Bridge Crew, which is the VR thing where everybody has their own station on the bridge and goes off and does missions and things, and that was fun. In that, you know, it was a thing where we all pretended to be in Star Trek, and enough of us had seen it that it felt like we were sort of, it was a semi-role play, I guess. But it was a really appealing thing to be in that atmosphere and sort of end up making a mess of it. And like, it wasn't the sort of thing where you sort of feel a fundamental new respect for Picard for the toughness of this job that he does. But it was cool, and I think it did encapsulate something of the feel that you would assume you'd have on the Star Trek bridge. I think, but obviously it just wouldn't really go anywhere because VR isn't the thing that people making VR games would need it to be, right?
Did always enjoy Artemis for that.
Artemis is excellent.
It's not an official Star Trek game, but it is a Star Trek game.
Yeah, it's so clearly a Star Trek game.
And you don't need expensive VR equipment, but if you can drag a few PCs into a room, then that's good. That's awesome. I really enjoyed Star Trek Online.
I was going to say exactly that.
Yeah, it was It was actually a really good party RPG, and I think you could beam down onto planets with like NPC companions, which was the perfect Star Trek fantasy. It's like you go down, you've got your red shirts with you, and the sound's really authentic. The missions are really short. Then you go back up to your spaceship, and there's a whole space kind of aspect of the game where you're going around getting into space combat. And again, all the kind of vessels were authentic, all the sounds were authentic, and it felt like a really fun kind of romp. As an MMO, it's quite like ambitious in many ways for trying to render a lot of different environments and different types of interaction with the world in one cohesive world.
I really liked having the freedom to create my own entire crew. You make one main character, but you also kind of collect and define your bridge crew. And you can sort of, group up with other players, but you can also beam down with like your actual team. And it's kind of nice sort of having the creative freedom to sort of come up with your own sort of archetypical Star Trek cast, which has obviously some game ramifications as well, but it's broadly just a kind of like, what do you want to do? I mean, that's kind of a nice, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's still going.
I think it is actually.
Star Wars.
Was it though?
Patrick writes, Dear Wrench and Glue Gun, I've only just got around to playing Prey after both installing and launching the 2006 game of the same name, then catching up on the subsequent spoiler cast recorded way back when in the sweltery summer of 17. Somewhere near the end, someone wistfully said that they'd play the game that's Prey with no combat, just exploring a space station, listening to logs, and figuring out what happened, to the tune of Totoro, Takoma, Takoma, Tak, and so on. My question is this. What games did you wish existed only to have them come true? Frankie Five Fingers, it doesn't count if you make them yourself. P.S. Shout out to Dev Game Club, a podcast from two veteran game developers that recently finished a fantastic Insiders retrospective of Half-Life.
Is Frankie Five Fingers Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got more than 5 fingers.
Well, per hand. It's a reference to Pentadact, which
I
is
see.
Latin... part of the Latin name for the South American bullfrog, which is refers to the fact they have 5 fingers.
I thought it was a reference to Five Nights at Freddy's at first.
Maybe it is. I don't quite remember. Did we ever talk about like gangster names at some point or something?
We did.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's how he knows that. Because that's come up before.
Yes, that is why that is a thing. So, yes, games we wished existed and then did.
Yeah, this kind of is the case for episodic Hitman. Back in the Blood Money days, I kept saying, like, if they just sold me a mission every month, I would happily pay for that. And they did, and I did. It was good.
Total War Warhammer. It's always seemed like an obvious fit, and then it finally happened.
More Life is Strange. I don't think that's the spirit of the question.
I think I can't pin on anything that I definitely sort of specifically wished for, but I know I definitely wanted like Jedi Knight style games to come back, and it feels like they have, because there's been like a run of good third person melee combat games, including Dark Souls series to some extent, from Blade Symphony to Absolver to that kind of thing. So that's definitely something that I wanted to happen that did. That's nice.
I do not say I want, I don't, that's not really how I think about games, because I'm happy to be surprised by a thing that comes along, I think. That's just a fundamental different approach to thinking about games, I think, than the one I usually operate on. I mean, there's a certain amount of, I wish there were more games about under the sea or fish or, things like that. And then Subnautica came along, but that wasn't, I wasn't specifically after a game like Subnautica. That was more just an idle, if I Google fish enough, maybe someone will think there's a trend and make a game.
Yeah, interesting.
Have Google will fish.
But nowadays I'm generally wary of saying like games I'd really love to exist, because if I ever wanted to like help make a game or something, I don't want to just like describe all of my ideas and things I would like to happen. Even
I'd still really like that murder mystery MMO I'm always banging on about. Like, I think
Midsummer Murders.
don't think that anyone has really made a satisfying murder mystery
No, that's true.
game. So
Why an MMO?
Well, mostly because of my massively Midsummer pitch.
Okay.
So, but I do think that obviously, like in things like RuneScape, the mission that people always seem to talk about, and maybe it's because they're talking to me, but they always talk about like a murder mystery that happened in that, and I think that like having watched a lot of Midsummer and Poirot and things like that, you do have a feel for these places where these counties or these environments where murder is just this really commonplace thing, and you just need to turn up and interrogate the people who happen to be hanging around that dining room or in that village or something, and you'll piece it together. And so I do think, like, all joking aside, I really would love to see someone take that on, like this set of mysteries or this idea of how clues unravel and stuff. And it's ultimately quite formulaic, so presumably there are ways to reduce the burden on scriptwriters and things like that. But they are all different, and it's still satisfying an itch each time, and I thought that could be quite cool. And that's why I think it wouldn't be an MMO, but it would be more like but it would be bigger than just a mission in the Dark Brotherhood storyline, or an isolated thing that everyone still looks back on fondly years later, but existed in this tiny slice.
If you did have like a detective MMO and the players were detectives, you might have a really crazy detective to crime ratio where there's like 20 people solving every little thing. Like, I think someone stole something. I'm going to solve it.
Which is weird because the traditional mode for TV detective is an absurd crime to detective ratio.
Yeah. 26 murders.
You can't go anywhere.
But also, yeah, because they sort of hinge around you being the only person who's worth calling in any of these scenarios. Because Chris was like, why is Jap always the only person who's ever summoned for these things? I'm like, well, actually,
as in the Chief Inspector and Poirot, if anyone's not like
ITV
real
is
deep on
probably
law.
only interested in the ones where he turns up,
But it's like, yes, but the implication of like a lot of Poirot mysteries is that murder, particularly among the British upper classes, is common enough in that world that it's worth. Like, you'd have to be... I'll paint the picture. You're on a cruise on a small boat with the most famous detective in the world. Is that the moment you choose to commit a crime in your life? Like, is that the moment you choose to do the murder that you've been building up towards? I would submit that in a world with a normal crime rate, you wait until the cruise is over. However, the implication is, the only way to make that make sense is that murder is so common that, like, that's the only window you've got. Or else you might be murdered. Like, that's,
And that bears out.
It does, yeah. Basically, it does. That's off topic. The next topic to be on.
Good segue.
Thanks, man. Comes from Nebajoth, who writes, "Hi, gang. This question is for Tom S. Partly because he doesn't get enough questions, and partly because his words on Hellblade in episode 201 and the efficiency of the game mechanic of whispering voices in creating a tangibly anxious atmosphere reminded me of his appreciation of the deep sense of unease instilled by Thumper in an earlier episode. So here's my question for Tom. Do you like games that make you uneasy? Is it a good thing when a game makes you anxious? For the rest of the gang, what game has made you the most anxious while playing it? Nebajoth. P.S. I watched my first Dota 2 International thanks to your coverage in episode 201. It was great. PPS. Yes, Team Liquid, yes!
Yay!
He bellows. Tom?
Yes, I do actually. I enjoy it a lot. Anything that moves me off the, endless plateau of unmoving mood, really.
Ennui.
It's useful to me. I do really enjoy it. I really enjoy films that do this very well. I'm really interested in the artistry of it and how it happens. And if I was ever going to make something, I would like to do that with it, just to make other people's lives a little bit worse.
Just want to bring some misery to the world.
Stuff like Under the Skin, fantastic movie for doing that. And loads of just incredible electronic musicians who just simply exist to make horror music.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I don't know. I can't really say why, but I do find it fascinating. And I do enjoy being stressed out by these things and put into that space. and kind of recovering from it afterwards, taking a few minutes to go, "Ooh, that was intense."
It's what makes you feel really alive, isn't it?
Well, it's that fear, isn't it? It's the terror.
That's why I always like tense games rather than like jump scare horror games.
Yeah.
Because jump scare horror isn't really a thing. You're afraid of the game rather than the thing in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the jump scare is just a reflex that your brain does before you even like have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Where if you're being immersed in this like horrible, anxious place, then that is you're engaging with something a bit deeper there, I think.
It's very rare that anyone uses a jump scare in a way that I would say is intelligent, if you see what I mean. Like, often it's kind of like, and at this point you just need a jolt or we need to do something. You know, it's like, it never really feels like anything other than a cheap shot.
Yeah, I agree.
Or at least, I can't call to mind anything to stem the inevitable tide of, well, you've missed this. I don't.
In terms of games that made you the most anxious, Tom?
Good question. I find them like quite broken games that are too empty, quite anxious. So like Pathologic and stuff like that is very good for that, and to the extent that it's intentionally like that way, but also is so shonky that you're in a world that's fundamentally broken in a way that is quite anxiety-inducing, I think. But I'm not sure to what extent that's craft and to what extent it's just we don't know how to build geometry properly.
Craft and crap.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Neptune's Pride. The very slow browser-based strategy game where you can and will betray your friends. Maybe DEFCON a little bit as well. We did like a real-time game of that where it lasts all day, and that was anything where there's like this constant time pressure that just never goes away. You could always be paying more attention. You could always be getting something done.
It's kind of a traditional horror choice, but Alien Isolation is one of those that keeps getting me, and it's because 99% of the time when you're aware of how a game has been made or a horror thing has been made, it loses some of its power over you, or like I say, you become afraid of the game, not the monster. You become afraid of when the designer is going to hit you with the thing, not the thing itself. Whereas the knowledge that it's not scripted makes me powerfully anxious. It's that sense of not being able to call upon like too many sort of knowledge of horror games or horror movies to kind of predict what's going to happen. Suddenly makes it awful, like in a good way. Like it's just not pleasant anymore because it's not like, and this is where it's going to get me. It's like sometimes it's not there, and that's a real source of anxiety. Oh, and I appreciate that's not like an unusual effect created by a sort of an off-kilter use of music or space or something. It is deliberate, but it is, I still think, unique in that regard. Like I can't think of any other kind of horror games where you're being hunted by a monster where it is unpredictable to quite that degree.
Yeah, and if it is, as in Amnesia, it looks so fucking stupid that if you actually confront it, it's just laughable.
Yeah, it's the big wonky pajama man. He's come to dribble on you. Next is Reed, who writes, "Greetings, CNC. My brother is a musician/composer who works in the very game-applicable discipline of electronic music production. He has expressed an interest in game music composition, but has no idea how to find developers with whom he might collaborate. Any suggestions? Thanks for the great pod, Reed."
I know that some people put, posts about their work or when they're looking for particular people to work with on their games on the TIG Source forums. It's the independent game resource, I guess, forums, and I'm mostly on there looking at the GIFs of games being made thread, but I do see some people talking about, what they have, their portfolio, things like that, really, and I don't know how successful it is. I don't know how reliable it is for those kinds of meetups, but it might be a starting point, or you might find like a local games hub or something where people are co-working. Go along.
Yeah, I can tell you ways composers have offered their services to me. It never worked because the only way I've ever done it is to, when I decide I need a composer, put out a call, make a blog post and a trailer, and ask for submissions, and or people send their portfolios in and stuff. And go through those, and at that moment, I'm looking for a composer. Once I have one, I'm no longer looking for a composer. So there's never any leeway. Like cold mailing me doesn't work, and coming to me at conferences doesn't work, and because it's a pretty hard and fast thing.
Has anyone ever composed you a theme tune for you?
For myself?
Yeah.
No. I never asked them for that.
But unsolicited, if someone sent you the perfect theme tune for yourself that you could use when going into a room, would that sway you?
How mechanically does this get played? Do I have to throw my phone in ahead of Just press play on that. I'll come in a sec.
Google Play.
This is where smart homes come in.
I did have to pick an entrance song for the Time Barons tournament at Stugan.
Nice.
As contestants walk into their selected match, this will be blasted from the speaker system. And I picked Same Old by The Heavy, who are a Bath-based band. I
interrupted what you were saying about work solicitations. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't really have any useful advice, really. Just a bunch of things that have not worked.
I think because I subscribe to a few art jobs mailing lists and things, or back from when I was freelance and whatnot, and the majority of those are theatre things or artist in residence things, but it might be worth signing up to stuff like that. I think these particular ones are from the Arts Council, and they're just from all over the country things where people are just looking for people to work on projects, and so that might be another source of that stuff.
I would say specifically social media stuff. So find out if there is a indie game dev group in Facebook for your region. There is definitely one for Southwest UK. Find out how you get access to that, and job postings are pretty frequent. The other thing is just being active on Twitter in sort of circles, sharing things you're working on. There's pretty big game dev community around sharing work in progress stuff, and that is a way of getting people to see your things.
I wonder if there's a music version of Screenshot Saturday.
Yeah, music.
Soundbite.
Wednesday.
Sunday.
I know, but basically, it's a boring answer, but those are the things that seem to work for people. You'd be amazed how much hiring gets done through Twitter, basically. At least in the initial kind of making contact with somebody whose work you like kind of way.
I'm assuming SoundCloud would be a useful thing to be on. I know that a fair few people use it as a kind of music-based social interface.
Next question comes from Jacob, who writes, Dear Creighton Bumbar, watch out, here comes a red hot topic right out to the internet presses. I'm sure people will already be asking you this, but just in case I'm the only one, here's a video of a journalist being bad at Cuphead, which has raised the question, should journalists be good at games? And let's not touch that fucking thing with a fucking barge pole, but move on to the rest of this otherwise good question. Personally, the answer is clearly no. Even the discussions which have come out of this topic, such as should the journalist know the genre, confuse me. For example, I'm not good at and do not enjoy strategy games, but if a reviewer I know to also be in the same position says that a strategy game is amazing, then I know it is worth trying, even though I'm not normally a fan of those types of games. A range of people looking at a game allows you to find the one which best fits your view, and in turn see it through their lens. Sorry. This is why I appreciate the Feminist Frequency videos, as they allow me to see games from a position I would not be able to on my own, and the more opinions, the more chance someone will say something thought-provoking. However, it seems like the vocal community of internet gamers want one blanket consensus on a game, and that deviant opinions are invalid. I better cut myself off before I rant on too much, but if you could just agree with exactly what I just said, then that would be great. Thanks for reading, Jacob. P.S. Love the podcast, been listening since the PC Gamer days, just never felt like I had anything to write in about, but that name pun seemed like pure unmined gold, and that pun, to reiterate, was crate and bumbar.
Nice.
And Godspeed to you, sir. That's fabulous.
Sorry, Tom, would you have preferred crate and crowbum?
Nope, that wasn't my issue.
So obviously to gloss over the kind of thing that the recent kind of Twitter ugliness that has prompted this being a discussion again. But I basically agree with everything you just said. Mm-hmm. There's no need to be good at games to offer a critical assessment of them, because the vast majority of people who play games are not good at them. The end. Sam writes, Dear Crotchets and Quavers, I'm a professional classical violinist. I have spent a quarter century finely tuning the movements of my arms, hands, fingers and brain for speed, control, coordination and timing.
The movements of the brain.
He's got the little grey cells, Pip. The Grudge. Why oh why does this not make me good at video games? Interrobang. Shooters, RTSs, platformers, wizard 'em up, sports games, stealth games, Metroidvania, roguelikes, roguelites, gunpoint, walking simulators. I am utterly average at them all. You may think that rhythm games would be where my advantage lies, but even there I barely slide down the good end of the bell curve. Kinky. Tom S.'s profession, that an understanding of time signatures would help me with Thumper, only served to twist the failure. I will concede that I can do the plastic guitar games pretty well, but that's a bit of a busman's holiday. So, Father Grudgemas, will you accept my whinging? The question. Which non-gaming proficiency would you translate into gaming skills, and how would that manifest? I've been a religious listener since episode 1, and your 1.5 to 4 weekly hours of PC gaming love are a genuinely positive force in my life. You've given me so much joy, semicolon. If I can ever help out with Crate and Crowbar, do opera or something, I would love to give something back. Keep casting them pods. Sam.
It's a shame that games aren't played from the shoulder and the
I
elbow.
was going to say, have you tried putting your keyboard under your chin out to one side and playing like that?
Rub some resin on it.
Yeah, like with a bow.
Yeah.
Just, yeah.
What? You should play a VR game where you gently saw your own arm off.
Great at that.
Be a master.
Surely that would the risk of creating some kind of strange cognitive nightmare next time he's being a professional violinist.
Might ruin your violin playing forever.
God, yeah.
What is a busman's holiday?
It's like when I have no idea. I don't know what it's like that.
You leapt right in there, though.
A busman's holiday is essentially when you, take a break from your day job to do something incredibly similar to your day job.
Okay.
Yeah, isn't it like a busman driving off on holiday, and you're still driving a bus in your own intern? I assume that's where it comes from.
Where it comes from.
It's like
but
when
that's
you
the
take the
gist of
bus.
it.
It's like when we take a mid-podcast break, talk about video games for a bit, and then switch the microphones back on.
I see. A podcaster's break.
Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna say, interestingly, well, I hope interestingly, otherwise this is a waste of time. Hopefully on the site, on RPS, I have a piece going up where I was talking to one of the researchers behind a tool set for improving at esports. This gets more interesting, I promise. So essentially they both used to be research fellows at NYU, and what they decided to do was try and use neuroscience and sort of improving at particular skills that are, important in competitive video games, and then coming up with a way to assess those so that people can then, figure out which elements or which parts of that are breaking down and which parts they might need to practice at and get better at. And so it's only gone into beta today, I think. So it's not something that I can assess, in any meaningful way. And I did ask specifically whether there was any research they could link me to that would correlate these things, because the examples that they gave were about, like in sports, the idea that someone is fast can be important in a whole bunch of games, but and so working on your speed or on your efficiency or whatever else is useful in a variety of different spheres, whether you're playing football or whether you're playing rugby or whatever else, but I'm not, I didn't have anything in front of me to assess how that applies to, the skills that you can measure with regard to gaming. But that's the theory that they're putting forward, is that, you have all of these neuroscientific skills, neuroscientific ways of measuring and perhaps training these skills, and then that would theoretically or hopefully translate into better technical performance in games. And so I'd be interested, like, I mean, it was just an interesting thing that this person is saying, that their hard-won skills in hand-eye coordination and, you know, that particular way of thinking doesn't translate to games. But maybe it would be interesting to, like, look at, because their product is, like, it's called State Space, and their first thing is AIM Lab. So it's focusing on, like, FPSs and stuff. But, like, I think maybe it's that stuff like perception isn't being honed in this particular, in music, you know, it's because you read in a very specific way. So maybe it's that stuff, and like reflex speed is different, you know, because you're not, I don't know. That would be interesting. Sorry, that was more interesting in my head.
You should send me the link and put it in the show notes if we want to.
I will. It hasn't gone up yet. But anyway. Yeah.
Go up in the future. But yeah, well, I mean, basically nothing I'm good at in real life translates to being good in games. If you could pick one transferable skill, though, what would it be? Echoing silence.
Is this like pick a skill?
A real life skill that you have that you wish was transferable to games in some way.
Alright, so a skill we do have
Yeah.
that you want to be useful in games.
Well, I'm good at driving and directions in real life, and in games I'm shit at both.
I think the ability to project my voice is something I wish was useful in games. I wish the fact that I could project from the diaphragm would
Like in
make...
Skyrim.
Yeah. Or like, no,
Your
like in a
dark
multiplayer
power.
game of some kind. That I just had a greater presence by the fact that I could bellow if I choose to. That'd be good.
I wish I could easily edit the games I'm playing to my liking. I always have really specific
games
ideas.
development is yours.
Yeah, I want my game development skills to transfer into playing games. I want to be able to just like click on a thing and say, no, work this way. Modding, but easier.
Tom?
Don't know, I've already figured out the Final Fantasy VII one-handed control systems. I feel like I'm pretty...
That's both a real life skill and a game skill.
Yeah, fine.
Straddling the barrier.
Yeah.
Oh,
Pip?
what?
What skill would you transfer?
I just said, like, I wish that my actual proficiency in driving and in directions translated to anything in games. Like,
That's true.
You've watched me not understand where I'm going in Destiny.
Yeah,
Because I'm
that
not
was
reading the
extraordinary.
cues in the same way that you do.
Yeah.
Basically, if anyone ever needs a game tested in terms of seeing what can go wrong,
Yeah.
send it to me. Don't send it to me. I've got so much to do.
Okay, next grudge comes from Juice, who writes, Dear Creighton Bumbar, I have a grudge for Pip's grudge book.
Is that the same as the last one?
The previous grudge can go in, by the way.
Okay, but what?
Is that the same bum intro as the last one? Or was the last one Crow Bum?
Hang on. Yes, it was. We have two Creighton Bumbars.
Nice.
This
Good
one comes from
effort.
Juice, who writes, I have a grudge for Pip's grudge book, and my grudge... He'd written dramatic pause, I'm doing it now. Is with you.
What?
I mentioned to the guys on my Discord server the debate about whether replacing words in game names with the word bum was funny. That was more than 24 hours ago. Actually, I feel like I should read this in the voice of like an audio log. like a System Shock game. That was more than 24 hours ago. They're still going. When they ran out of games to insert bums into, they started bumizing films. They've since moved on to putting bums in everything. It's been an almost unbroken stream of bums, and it's showing no signs of stopping. One guy has even changed his nickname to Dr. Bum. It's abominable. Thanks. Sincerely, Bum Juice. Oh no, he writes. Conclusion.
Look, I think that a lot of people took me trolling Tom, which is essentially what this was, because I saw how much he wasn't enjoying it and really doubled down on it, but accidentally seemed to just trigger a lot of bum enthusiasm in other people, as evidenced by the Discord chat that immediately followed that. And I think a lot of people were like, but why does Pip think this is so funny? And it's like, well, I didn't until the reaction of the people who didn't think it was funny kicked in. And then, like, everybody who or not everybody, but, like, there seemed to be a very definite, like, wave of activity, which was essentially, I don't know why she thinks this is funny, to then experimenting with adding bum to things, and then finding somewhere it did work, and then getting gleefully delighted about it. So
yeah, most people are new to this, but a top tip here, top Chris tip is a top Chris Pip tip is
Oh my God.
don't. If you can tell that Pip's going to find this hilarious, if you're distressed by this, don't express how distressed you are by the joke that is unfolding around you, because it's not going to get better anytime quick.
that's how you almost ended up with a lifelong membership of the Michael Bublé fan club.
It is, which is why I've learned to look impassive and not emote in any way every time you mention that.
It can't troll you if you don't move.
Exactly. You're just going to stay very still and not give it whatever form of satisfaction it happens to be seeking with this particular joke.
So I figure I'm not going to put it in the grudge book, but I will put it in the grudge bomb.
The grudge bum. The grudge bum can't be a thing.
Well, it's that or the bum book.
I'll take bumbuck.
Okay, fine. It's in the bum book.
I just don't want to have to say, when someone writes in inevitably to continue this bit, we're stuffing it in the grudge bum. I just don't want to go, I just don't want to take this
That
podcast there.
works. That works. Let's take inventory of the grudge bum.
Oh God.
Tom is just like now not looking at me. It's just
It's all
no
over.
eye contact.
Oh, we have one last grudge. It's not about bums, thank
it
God.
not?
No, it's not. It's from David, who writes, Dearest purveyors of Perpetually Pleasant Pod, I bear grudge.
Oh.
Often, in Hitman 2016, an NPC will say something like, ah yes sir, right this way please, and Agent 47 is then expected to follow at a polite conversational distance. A simple enough task if the player is using a controller with an analog stick for input, as you can make 47 strut along at any speed you like. It's another story if you're using WASD on a keyboard, which, in which case, he has...
Wast on his keyboard.
Look. I'm going to say and in the game here, just so we've finished all of the jokes that are about PC games. In which case, he has precisely two speeds, entirely stationary or slightly faster than the NPC's walk. To match the NPC's walking speed, PC players are forced to tap the walk key intermittently, which results in a jilted, limping walk animation that I can only describe as the most suspicious-looking thing ever. Your other option is to hold down walk, but run little laps around the person you're following, you know, like a maniac would. This might not bother me if the game didn't encourage the art of graceful infiltration. I think there are some genuinely cool moments to be had when you're in disguise and 3 security clearance levels deep within a heavily guarded compound without having raised so much as an eyebrow of suspicion. It's all a bit bubble bursting to then have 47 mince about like an idiot. Is this an issue in many games? This is an issue in many games. That wasn't a question. Don't know why I pronounced it like one. This is an issue in many games, David definitely initially wrote. But this one struck me the most. Am I being unreasonable? Should I just buy a controller and sacrifice the precision that a mouse affords? Surely this most PC-centric of pods is the right place to come to commiserate over keyboard-related ambulatory woes. Love the pod. It really is something special. Begrudgingly yours, David.
Yeah, I share this grudge. I have it even on controller, like if pushing the stick all the way is too fast, then holding it at the exact right position is a pain in the ass. There is a game that auto-matches you to an NPC speed when you're close enough to them.
I was thinking about this. I can't remember what it is either.
Yeah, I was gonna.
It wasn't Guild Wars 2, was it?
No. See, basically all games
or
need
something.
the match speed key from X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Like match, target lock the person you're walking with and engage like...
I think The Witcher 3, if you're riding behind someone, you move the same speed, but if you tap the run, the person in front of you also runs faster.
Oh.
It's really, really weird.
The
but
Riz,
kind of
was
works.
it the Assassin's Creed games do this, right? Maybe? Ah, man, there is a game. I'm thinking Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption has a ride with key where you you ride with somebody on the horse and you then
that
like
might be it.
you trot along with each other. I think it even maybe goes into like auto horse. Where,
Activate auto horse.
because I mean that's horses do. It's funny because like that is one of those classic like real life moderating your walk speed so you walk with the person you're walking with is extremely natural.
Yeah.
Like it's not something you really think about.
I don't know. I speak as a 5-foot woman who dated a 6'4" man for a time, and there was a certain amount of just every now and again when we were walking down the street, maybe every 4 or 5 paces, there was like a little shuffle run that I would do just to keep up.
You need to get you auto horse.
Yeah.
Need to get
Just ride
him
horses
auto
everywhere.
horse.
Everyone needs auto horse. That's the conclusion we've come to.
Meet in the middle.
But yeah, it's dumb to have a system in your game for delivering a story that actively fights the control system you've provided players to experience it with. Just laying it out there.
I suppose this is a thing though, because like if you alter people's experience of a controller system, then that automatically maybe invites confusion, or it invites frustration, or especially if it invites you to move slower than usual. I think that's one thing that I fight against in games, is when it forces me to go slower than I'm used to.
Yeah. Thing is though, like a related issue that frustrates me is whenever a game has a character talking to you and you're not sure if going fast outside of the particular corridor that you're in at that moment is going to stop the thing you're listening to, so you stop and listen.
Oh, yeah.
Which is something that like Gears awarded really well, where whenever there was like a person talking to you to explain the next mission thing, your character would put their like finger to the intercom the communicator in their ear, and walk slower, and you could never go so fast that the conversation wouldn't be finished by the time you got to the end of the corridor. And if you did stop to have a look around, you'd be fine. But if you just held down the stick at its furthest extreme and pointed yourself at the next objective, the conversation would neatly finish at about the right time, which is just a good bit of, the thing Tom says, you're not forced to kind of maintain an awkward pace. You're not really forced to think about it. It just sort of happens. Which, if you're going to do that kind of thing, is the right way to do it. Because I hate feeling like, if I run forwards now, I'm not going to hear the thing or whatever.
Should I put this in and we can all append our names to it? Because it's a bloody irritation on all fronts.
Signed.
Cosine.
Tangent. Lots of tangent.
God.
Maths gags. That's all of the maths gags, questions and grudges that we've got time for. If you would like to send us a question or grudge for a future podcast, you can do so by emailing us questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at crateandcrowbar. Follow us on Twitter there. You can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. Crate and Crowbar is very, very kindly supported by our Patreon donors who allow us to do the pod, and also spin-offs like Miniatures Monthly and the Bloodborne playthrough. You can find out more about our Patreon at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar and hang out with our community, why not, on Discord, which is where they hang out. You'll find the details for that on the website and in the show notes, because it's probably an easy way of making a short Discord link, but I sure as fucking hell haven't done it, and it's only been 18 months or whatever. But it's great. You should go there. It's one of the best Discord communities I've ever been part of, and inexplicably, it's grown up about something we made. Hey! That's the noise that makes us make. You go there and you make that noise as well. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, you can do so. I'm on Twitter at @CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Anyone else?
I am
Frankie Five Fingers.
Frankie Five Fingers is Pentadact, PENTADACT.
Pip.
I'm at Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWARR.
Tom S.
At PCG Ludo. I'm mostly tweeting about Destiny these days, though, so.
That's fine, Tom. So am I.
So good.
I don't tweet about games at all. Insect pictures all the way down.
Good job, everybody. Yeah. And thanks for listening, everybody.